Are they unmuted? Everyone's unmuted? Yes, please. Okay, it's 6:30.
Call a meeting to order and we do a roll call.
Director Danziger,
Here.
Director Hassler.
Here.
Director Jex,
Here.
Director Jorgens is absent, and Director Romer,
Here.
and staff present is Fire Chief Winokur, Administrative Services Director Sasser, and District Council Holtzman.
To join us in Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Like to invite any comments for the closed session items, if there anyone in the public who's
We do not have any attendees.
okay.
Checking our email, we have not received any written public comment.
We'll adjourn into the closed session then.
Time is 6:31. Sorry.
Yeah. Way up the top of the oh, yeah. The property was so, the house was like shack. On the other hand,
One, two. One. 1, 2.
We ready?
Yes.
Maybe our age. That's the water.
Time is 7:01.
Okay, I'd like to reconvene the meeting and ask for a roll call.
Director Danziger,
Here.
Director Hassler,
Here.
Director Jex,
Here.
Director Jorgens is absent, and Director Bromer.
Here. Okay, I'd just like to report there's nothing to report on the closed session or regarding any action. And we'll invite the public to make public comment on items that are on the agenda.
So we do not have any hands raised, and we have not received any written public comment.
Okay, we'll proceed to item 7, public hearing.
Good evening, Director. The next item before you is item 7.1, to waive the first reading and introduce ordinance 23-06, a Moraga-Orinda Fire District of Contra Costa County, California, declaring certain hazardous vegetation and combustible material a public nuisance and providing for the abatement and or removal thereof, and finding that adoption of the ordinance is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Directors, this ordinance was pulled out of the fire code in our 2019 fire code. We had this in there with the exterior hazard abatement portion of the fire code. With the update to the 2022 code and removing exterior hazard abatement out of the fire code, we had to pull the abatement hearing process out of the fire code and create a separate ordinance. This is using the same procedures that were in the previous fire code, with one addition where we could have a hearing at a non-regular scheduled meeting or a special meeting of the board. That's all we're doing with this ordinance, is just establishing the process if we need to do any district funded abatement work. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Are we anticipating needing those appeals meetings at times other than the regular board meetings? Is that likely?
We hope not, sir, but in the past, we have run into some issues with timeframes. That if a person requests a hearing to get the ball rolling, if you will, it would be nice to have it if the board was available to do a special meeting versus pushing it off another 30 days.
And would those meetings be subject to the same? They'd be in person and with a remote option?
Yes, sir. All the same rules would apply. I think the other element to Fire Marshal's point is that because of the notification requirements and the requirement that any information can be introduced must be provided to the person who is appealing well in advance, et cetera. Sometimes the request could be made as many as 15 days before a meeting, and we would not be able to meet the notification requirements. So it would in fact be 45 days. And given the seasonal and relatively timely nature of some of this work, there were several circumstances where a person who was appealing wanted to move forward, the district wanted to move forward, and our process and the requirement that we hold these hearings only at regularly scheduled board meetings could
Right.
result in things being pushed out until the rain was falling, which would raise the
Yeah.
question of what is the value of actually doing the work at this point?
Right. Still a requirement of 3 for a quorum.
Yes, sir.
But it just expands our options.
Yes, sir. I would think of it as the fire marshal mentioned, all of these things were previously in the fire code. And this would just give additional flexibility, which may be useful, it may not. But it would give us additional options when these appeals occur.
Thank you. Nothing more further from me.
So we, on this particular item, since we've waived, do we need a motion?
So we're going to, if there's no more questions by the district board, we will go ahead and open the hearing to the public. If there's any more preliminary board comments. And then so we can take any public comment.
Okay, any public comment on this item?
We do not have any hands raised. And we do not have any written public comment. So questions, discussions, proposed action by the board?
Anybody have comments? Otherwise,
we-
I'm prepared to make a motion. No, I'm good.
That's fine.
Good. I move per 7.1 to waive the first reading and introduce and incorporate the language of the entire 7.1.
I second it.
Moved in second.
So we can open public comment on the motion? We do
Any
not have
public comment
any-
on the motion?
We do not have any hands raised or received written public comment.
Okay, then we can proceed with the vote.
Director Danziger,
Aye.
Director Hasler,
Aye.
Director Romer,
Aye.
Director Jex.
Aye. 7.2,
Good evening, directors. Next item 7.2 is to waive the first reading and introduce ordinance 23-07, an ordinance of the Moraga-Orinda Fire District of Contra Costa County, California, repealing ordinance 20-01, an ordinance adopting an administrative citation program and adopting amended administrative citation program, and finding that the adoption of the ordinance is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. Directors, in 20-01, we brought forward to you an ordinance to give the fire prevention staff the ability to issue administrative citations when the educational process wasn't working or we couldn't get that voluntary compliance. The ordinance before you this evening is just a slight, making some slight amendments to the previous ordinance. We're making clear that no pre-citation is notice is required for violations that constitute an immediate danger to health and safety. Provides that no pre-citation notice is required if the fire official issued an administrative citation to the responsible person for a violation of the code in the immediate preceding calendar year, and the responsible person has violated the same provision of the code. So what this is going to allow us to do, if we cited last year a person for violation A, we come back this year, violation A is still there, we can immediately progress in the process. But if we cited for violation A last year and we come back, violation B is there, it starts the process over with a pre-citation in the education and noticing process. It makes it explicit that each day the violation occurs constitutes a separate violation. While the district is not required to fine a person for each day of the violation, this reserves to the district the ability to do so in specific cases. Finds the adoption of the ordinance is exempt from California Environmental Quality Act. Happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
any questions?
It's a question. I know it's the fire chief or designee. I assume you're a designee. Are there other designees that we've used last year or? Just you?
Yes, sir. So generally speaking, the issuing of a citation is the end of a long chain. And so there may have been many members of prevention or suppression or other members of the department who've been involved. But the issuance of a citation is usually over the fire marshal's signature with the fire marshal's approval. And then on any that rise to the level of requiring additional scrutiny, then I get involved as well. But as a general statement, that's been delegated to the fire marshal, but not delegated below them.
Okay.
So the process would be if you had a citation one year and the same issue was present the next year, the exact same issue,
Yes, sir.
then you could issue a citation without going through what could be
Restarting.
month-long process
Yes, yes.
to issue a citation. Okay.
In summary, sir, it would assume that the following year was a continuation of the outreach and education. And that goes back to the 2019 fire code adoption and the inclusion of the pre-citation 30 days, which was included based on concerns voiced by the Orinda City Council that this was new, and we were definitely changing our posture and the nature of our enforcement, and that residents would need time to adopt, to implement the change requirements, and that they were concerned that implementation they didn't want it to be compelling. We wanted to focus on the outreach and education role, which we share. We're very committed to voluntary compliance. This is in cases where, because the issue has previously been cited, we are certain that the resident or the person who owns or controls the parcel was aware of the requirement, which is why it's specific to the same violation.
Okay.
And the most frequent example we see this is on the large undeveloped parcels with annual grass and weeds that may have been mitigated under force of citation or not in the prior year, where some of those owners wait to see if we're checking. And what we found as a result was that we were spending a lot of time running around figuring out who had done the work and who had not, consuming tremendous amounts of staff time and preventing us from moving our outreach, education, enforcement efforts onto new areas. And there was no penalty. Oh, you got me, I'll do it now. And so it created a perverse incentive. We're doing the work, which is expensive and time consuming. Well, if you were a out of area undeveloped parcel owner with no particular commitment to our community's fire safety, why wouldn't you wait for the fire department to come find out before you did the work? Now you can do that, but it comes with a fine, and that fine escalates and can escalate very quickly.
So I just have like a scenario.
Sure.
I mean, I actually know a specific property in Orinda that we did a lien hearing last year. And I go by this one property all the time, and it looks terrible right now. So would this apply? They didn't get a citation last time. It was a lien. That doesn't apply to this.
Citation preceded the lien, right?
Should have, I'd have to check the specific property, sir. The idea would be, in that case, we pick up right where we left off. So if it was a pre-citation, we go right to the $100 citation.
It was mitigated after we did the lien. Then it was mitigated, but now it looks horrible.
To go to the lien hearing, they would have had to have gotten that, at least a pre-citation notice. So the next step in the process would be that $100 citation.
Okay.
And if I may, sir, that does also speak to one of the first things Fire Marshal Isaac did upon joining the district was to point out that we didn't have an administrative citation. And my response to his first thing I said, what is an administrative citation? Because prior to that, the only option we had available to us was a lien hearing and a lien. And I have said and believe strongly that a lien funded work on an occupied parcel around someone's home is not a good idea. We should not be doing that. The resident should be mitigating their own home, and we should be finding ways to encourage and perhaps compel them to do that. And that liens are really only appropriate for undeveloped parcels with either out of area or unresponsive or unengaged landowners, some of whom are making a financial decision that is cheaper and easier for them to have us do the work, which is out of our control. But the creation of the administrative citation process was specifically to reduce our reliance on lien funded work, specifically around owner occupied developed parcels.
That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. Any further questions? If not, I'll open the hearing.
We do not have any hands raised.
Any
And we-
preliminary other board comments? Public comments?
We do not have any public comment. Any discussion, questions, proposed action?
I'll make a motion if no other comments.
Second.
Okay, well, I'm gonna make the motion to waive the first reading and introduce ordinance 2307.
Second.
Director Danziger? Oh, I
No, you gotta
apologize.
open it.
We need to
Yeah.
open Public comment on the motion?
on the motion?
We do not have any hands raised. And we do not have any written public comment.
Close the hearing then, and
Director Danziger,
Aye.
Director Hassler,
Aye.
Director Romer,
Aye.
Director Jex.
aye. Since this is a first reading, will this come back on our agenda for final approval next month?
Yes.
Okay. All right, move on to item 8.1, information only reports relating to meetings attended by any district directors in the district, at the district expense.
None?
None. Okay, item 8.2.
Questions and informational comments from board members and staff? None?
None.
On 8.2,
Yes.
is this the one that I'd like to publicly commend Captain Jacob Arola and for the contributions he made to the Child Abuse Prevention Council. Other than that, I have no comments.
I would have a comment to thank for the open house that was at Station 45 this last weekend. I think the community appreciated it.
Okay, any communications received? 8.3.
All right, there's one letter included. Thank you for the district's support of the Child Abuse Prevention Council.
I jumped the gun, I'm sorry.
All right. 8.4. Our chief update.
Team directors, Gloria Sash will be providing the finance report.
Right, so the outstanding receivables are $88,702 from Strike Team. And that's from activity that occurred in January and March of 2023. Next slide. And then the only other significant item we wanted to share was that we purchased an additional $5 million 3-month treasury bill with a yield of about 5%. And so that's in addition to the other $3 million. So we have about $8 million in treasuries at this point. This concludes the finance report.
Nice going.
Next up, I'll be providing the human resources report. We currently have active recruitments. Those are ongoing with firefighter, paramedic trainee and lateral interviews occurring Thursday and Friday with across the street here, where we saw some of the applicants at the open house. And we look forward to seeing them all dressed up tomorrow and on Friday. We have our fire captain a promotional opportunity coming up in June. We're finalizing the proctors, and we have 3 applicants who are busily preparing. We have open and continuous for the fuel mitigation specialist. Just today received a 2-week notice from one of our current specialists who is moving on. Well, this is a good thing. We're happy for him. He's moving on to a step up on his path to becoming a firefighter with a regional agency.
Yeah.
We're very excited for him. Wish him well. He's done great things here, and this is a good progression, a good next step for him to work. Very excited for him, but we're continuing to work through the applications we've received. Christine recently changed that to open continuous. So we have a steady stream of applicants, and there's several that we believe will be a good fit. And we have another a recent hire coming on, I believe next week will be a person who's been going through backgrounds and had to give 2 weeks their previous. So 1 out, 1 in, and we're continuing to move forward with our full position here. Our fire inspector plans examiner, we've made an interim appointment of Steve, who started the position May 1st. We're very excited for him. He's done a great job as a fuels mitigation specialist and done everything we have asked, to include what he's doing here tonight. At the same time, he continued in parallel to advance his education, his progression through the required coursework. And he was simply missing the experience. So we made an interim appointment to give him an opportunity to demonstrate that the education and that he is able to match the OJT here. We're very excited about filling that gap and giving the fire marshal and his team some much needed relief and reducing our reliance on contracted third-party plans examiners by bringing it in-house as authorized by the board.
Nice.
Very excited about that. And then we're working through final coordination with Cicera to ensure we have the language correct with regard to potential for inadvertently triggering pension obligations. But we have a candidate who we would like, and we're ready to bring someone on as the project coordinator for the tunnel East Bay Hills fuel break, which is very good timing as our environmental review and cultural review rapidly trends towards complete. Things dry out, things stop growing. It's a very good time of year for us to start work, and we look forward to bringing that person on in the very near term to begin the mitigation portions of that project. That'll be obviously the grant goes through 2025. This will be a multi-year project to get it done, but we're very excited about transitioning out of the planning phase into the execution phase. And I believe that completes the human resources
I
report.
have one question on
Sure.
it. How many firefighter paramedic candidates are you interviewing?
I believe 32. We've had
Oh.
2 cancellations, so I believe we have 30 scheduled.
That's great.
Some won't show up. This always happens. Then the interview panel drinks coffee and waits for the next one. But we have a healthy population. It
That's great.
remains to be seen the quality of that population, but all the initial signs are encouraging.
Are there some laterals?
2 lateral applications.
Great.
Next, we have the fire marshal update.
Good evening, directors. Busy month for us. We're seeing an uptick in our complaints. Property transfer inspections were 123. You'll notice our number of assessments for 2023 is up to 680. That was our roadside evacuation routes that we did. We had 582 passed, 98 failed, which is pretty good since we hit that really hard last year. You also notice our number of open cases from 2022 is now down to 23 cases. And Marcia, can you advance one slide, please? The one that has the,
Right there at the top.
is it at the top? Okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't see it. So just wanted to kind of let you know where we're at for those open cases, the 23 open cases. So 6 of the properties have received multiple $500 citations. 4 properties have received their first $500 citation. That means they received the 100, 200. They're now up to the max $500 citation. 10 properties have received their $200 citation, and 3 properties have asked for an extension to the end of May of 2023. So we're working to get those handled and try to get some movement with those property owners that are now receiving their $500 citation.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
About that. I wonder if maybe this is council answer this too, or are those citations subject to be to the public to actually list who the property addresses on those?
I'm gonna defer to council on that one, sir.
Well,
Is it
my
public?
thought process is it might,
Yes, because they're probably public records, but I don't know for a fact, but I just can't think of any theory under which they wouldn't be.
Yes, sir. I don't think they're privileged. There certainly is no shortage of history of sort of a name and shame approach, specifically say with water bills. Have been a recent example in this community. From our perspective, particularly as we move into the repeat, the $200 and above areas, I have no objection to publishing that. I would caution against publishing earlier in the process where there are plenty of folks who are diligently working to comply and for a variety of reasons haven't gotten there. But by the time we get to the $200 or $500 citation, there have been repeated and numerous touch points where the information is clearly understood. And some of those properties represent a significant risk to the community due to their size and strategic location that really undercut our efforts at the strategic level to reduce the community's exposure to wildfire risk.
okay.
What's our collection experience on these citations? Once,
Right, so the citation administration is outsourced to a company called Data Ticket. And so they do a lot of government agencies like parking tickets and so forth throughout the area. So Data Ticket, they collect on all of them. And so basically, I think if you don't pay within, I forget what it is, it's a pretty reasonable amount of time, then they send you to the franchise tax board for collection. So we have that set up. So the collection rate has been good.
good.
Our chipping days, we have 15 days chipped so far, estimated tonnage removed 55 tons. We have 2 additional days set up for the month of May before we'll cease June 1st as we pivot to our inspections. With Steve on board, we've reached out to our e-occupancies and we're setting up a meeting over the summer months to hand them the inspection forms, get them up to speed, allow them to answer questions if they have anything as they review the inspections. Then we're going to set up second week of school. We will get back out there and actually perform those e-occupancy inspections. And once Steve gets his feet underneath them, we'll get on the R2 occupancies as well. Current projects, getting those re-inspection done. We're finishing up prescribed fire projects with the new staff, Steve and the new fuels mitigation manager specialist. We are working on training, make sure they're up to speed as we start inspections June 1, preparing for those inspections, finishing up any remaining winter fuel reduction projects, handling those 680 inspections and follow-ups for the evacuation routes. And we're still handling the county, or I'm still attending county fire marshal meetings as the county fire marshals are just having monthly meetings or quarterly meetings just to make sure we keep that flow of information open and see if anybody's encountering any issues with the fire code that we need to address through the next cycle. Next slide, please, Marcia. Here are violations for the month, and because we did the evacuation routes, we have seen a change now that 15-foot clearance is our biggest violation. And again, that's the 15 feet of clearance over a fire apparatus access road. And that's one of the 2 things we were looking for as we do our evacuation routes. That's the end of my report. Happy to answer any questions the board may have.
The top one, what, how to say? Are those priority?
Yes, sir. Those are our evacuation routes. So we are making those a priority to get those properties into compliance.
And this goes back to the calendar year 23 fire prevention plan and priorities that was presented to the board in March, published in January as an internal document that identifies the priority areas and the time frame. And one of the fire marshal's innovations for this year, working with fuel mitigation manager Gordon Graham, based on the previous year's experience, was that the roadside clearance is not by and large tied to seasonal and recurrent hazards such as weeds. So a tree that is overhanging the road is a violation of the fire code at all times. And that there was no reason to wait until June 1st to begin inspections of those areas. So leaning into the clearance requirements along the evacuation routes in advance of the June 1st deadline frees up resources to go do more comprehensive full parcel side yards, backyards inspections away from the evacuation routes in the priority neighborhoods, specifically the Downs, the Sleepy Hollow, Sanders Ranch, and Campo Lindo, I believe, were identified on that document. So that what has happened in prior years is we've gotten stuck on the evacuation routes. And after that, 30 days after the first inspection occurs, we're back re-inspecting. And we ended up spending almost 30 days of roadside inspection last year. And right around July 1st, as complaints started to stack up, we had to go out and re-inspect the roadside and then start to service those complaints. We found it very difficult to free up staff resources to go into neighborhoods that we thought were priority areas for fire transmission. So evacuation routes only address the issue of getting residents out, but they don't address the issue of keeping fire out. And the neighborhoods that have been selected are those that have significant wildland urban interface exposure, have organized neighborhood organizations, either HOAs, Firewise, otherwise, that can be utilized and beneficial to our attempt to share the message that we are coming. These are the standards that will be inspected against. These are the dates we'll be in your area, and these are the resources you can access in advance of our arrival to come into compliance with the fire code. The HOAs have been very helpful in that effort. And so our hope is trying something new this year, utilizing some resources. I believe Dennis will be able to share later. Engineer Steve Rognes built a graphic display that shows the status of parcels, inspected compliant, inspected non-compliant, that when combined with some of our other layers, I believe will provide very valuable insights regarding the state of our efforts and where we ought to be prioritizing for either if additional resources and time become available this year, or for next year, how we build on that. As we start to see these circles overlap, the gaps that fire might be able to run, I think will be very apparent in this new display. And the underpinning of that, of course, is that we have resources available to put against that problem, and moving the evacuation route inspections to before June 1st is a critical element in that plan.
The Moraga Way, is there still a lot of work to be done on that street?
Moraga-Orinda has gotten a lot better, sir. Especially down by where the
There's been a
overhanging
lot
trees.
done, but
Yes, sir. And also, as you came, if you were heading towards 41 into Moraga, a lot of the city-owned and some PG&E-owned land around the Orinda Oaks Park, dramatically better, great
Yeah.
deal of work. And just beyond that, where the trees were particularly thick and overhanging, there was some thinning. And then by creating the pedestrian and bike path, the roadway was shrunk, meaning a number of violations are no longer violations because the road is no longer where the road was. So that reduced some of the violations as well.
Yeah.
When you lose 3 feet of road, things that were in violation are no longer in violation.
okay.
For the tunnel East Bay Hills fuel break update, as mentioned previously, we're wrapping up the environmental review. There'll be more, it'll be ongoing, and we're closing on hiring the coordinator. We have open contracts with contractors that provide the mitigation services we require. So as soon as we have the green light from the environmental consultant and the cultural consultant, and we have the coordinator on board, we will turn to rapidly. As I mentioned before, because of the late rains and the heavy rains for this year, that's in excellent alignment with the seasonal nature. There are areas where it's simply too wet to work still. We've gotten some calls from very experienced, well-equipped contractors saying, look, the machinery is getting bogged down. It's too early to work in these areas. There's still springs flowing freely in some of the areas that we're interested in. Things are still growing on the north and northeast slopes, so it would be inappropriate to cut them already. So we're trending towards beginning the work, but has not yet begun. Dennis, for a prescribed fire update.
All right, thank you, Chief. Good evening, directors. I wanted to give you a quick update on what we've been doing and what we're doing with prescribed fire, kind of bring things into context. Marcia, next slide, please. So why prescribed fire? It's one of the tools that we use here in the district to manage our fuels. Fire behavior, wildland fire behavior is fuels, weather, topography. We have very little influence over 2 of those, but the fuels is one thing that we can do. So what we're trying to do with our program and prescribed fires is reduce those fuels to lessen the occurrence of extreme fires. It also turns out that prescribed fires is very financially kind of sustainable over long term. When you compare it to, we were paying at the North Orinda Shaded Fuel Break a huge amount of money for hand crews to go in and do work. And that was necessary because it was a first entry into areas that hadn't seen fire or become fire adapted as a first step. And so prescribed fire, we've gone back in and retreated some of those areas to basically clean up what was left over and put them back into a more fire adapted ecosystem. Prescribed fire also minimizes the spread of insect and pest diseases. We're seeing some of that on the backside of San Pablo Reservoir with our cooperators with East Bay Mud using fire, getting smoke in the air. Seems there's some research that shows that reduces the reoccurrence of the bark beetle infestation, although most of those trees are pretty far gone already. It enhances conditions that support native plants. We work cooperatively with the California Native Plant Society that have done some transect surveys on areas that we burned. We actually masticated, and we came back in and burned. We did some native wildflower and native grass seeds to prevent erosion in there, and they came back and they were thrilled with the results of our work in there. So that one particular area, we've gone back and had 2 entries of fire in an attempt to keep the coyote brush from coming back and closing the canopy again. Provides forage for game, improves the water quality and the yield from our local watersheds, and recycles nutrients back into the soil. So again, it's a tool that we're using. It's got collateral benefits to reducing the fuels. Marcia. So how do we use prescribed fire? There are really 2 ways. Pile burning is one of those. We try and do that mostly in the wet months. As you can see from the photos, the surrounding area of where we've done pile burning is all green grass. We don't have to build expensive control lines or disturb soil, which would then lead to invasive plants getting a better foothold. This area here on your right is an area behind Donald Ream School in Moraga that was actually a Town of Moraga project in their Mulholland Ridge open space. But when we walked up there, and all those gray dots on there are piles that were burned, the area was rich in native bunch grasses and stuff. So that was very encouraging. Hopefully those will be able to go back into the areas that they were shaded out from the coyote brush. And pile burning is also, it gives us a lot more latitude to burn when air quality is conducive to letting us put a little bit of smoke in the air. Next slide, please. The other way that we use prescribed fire is broadcast burning or understory burning, a little more dramatic, but allows us to treat larger areas. This is what we use. One of these pictures is up at Bear Ridge, where we have the CNPS come out and look at the work that we've done. And again, we're able to, 1, keep the coyote brush from back encroaching, discourage some of those non-native plants from coming back in, and encourage the native plants. We're also using this in some areas like oak understory to burn underneath the oak understory. We were talking about Camino Pablo and Moraga Way. If you drive out towards San Pablo Reservoir, the area on the left, East Bay Mud calls it their pear orchard property. It's Orinda Horseman's lease. We actually burned there in 2019 or 2020. And every time I go back, I look at it, it's still maintained a very open understory with very little fuel on the ground. So we're trying to do some enhancements there this year to do some more understory burning in that area, and then use it prescribed fire to maintain areas of the North Orinda shaded fuel break to keep the heavier fuels from coming back in. Next slide, please, Marcia. The planning process. It's not like we got matches, we're going out there, we're going to do prescribed fire. It's pretty involved. Takes a lot of coordination. We start by working with the landowner or that land manager. In some cases, it's an HOA. In some cases, it's one of our partners like East Bay Mud, the Orinda School District. There's a number of folks that we work with. One of our key partners and collaborators actually at this point is the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. Our relationship with the district has grown over the years to now, if they see a good window for us to get projects done, they'll call me and they'll say, hey, it looks like the next 2 weeks or the next week we have some good burning conditions, and after that it gets iffy. So if you have something, let's see if you can pull it together. We do submit a smoke management plan to the Air Quality Management District that gets reviewed, and there's a number of elements that I'll talk about in a minute that go into that kind of cover all the bases as far as smoke impacts, and a lot of those translate back over to the responsible use of fire on the landscape. If the project is outside of city limits and state responsibility area, we work with CAL FIRE, our partners there, and generally do a comprehensive prescribed fire plan that goes more into the operations side of prescribed fire, and we get what's called an LE7 permit from them that says, so they can be assured that everybody from the local unit in Morgan Hill through northern region all the way up to North Ops is in the loop, and they know that we're doing a prescribed fire in a period of time. And then planning process, we wouldn't be able to do some of the broadcast burning or any of the burning we do if we didn't have the resources to do it. So it oftentimes is a complicating factor. You start looking at, okay, I've got 365 days in the year to do this project. but only this many are air quality management days. And only this many are available from our partners at CAL FIRE. And now, we look at our training schedule and the schedule for MOFD firefighters and cooperating agencies. And they said, well, we have this training and that training and these projects. And everybody was on a big fire for the last couple of days. So that window has the ability to shrink very quickly. So Dave, the burn, do we have engines, crews, holding and firing resources available? And then we look at our communication support team for logistics and public information. And then just before we burn, we can get like a 3-day kind of a window from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District that we'll notice then that we want to burn, 3 days from now. And they'll say, well, it looks good, but we don't get the final approval to burn until 8 o'clock that morning of the burn. So, and they've been very, very sensitive to us saying that, look, there's people coming from other counties to help us do this particular project. So if it looks like it's going to be a no burn day at the last minute, you need to let us know. I don't think we've canceled any burns because of that. They've generally been able to accommodate us, but we're sensitive to their needs and they're very sensitive to ours. And then finally, we work with the National Weather Service to get what's called a spot weather forecast for every project we do. It's part of the requirements in the smoke management plan. We submit online, but we have a fire weather forecaster out of Monterey that will write a fire weather forecast based on that particular spot that we identify that we're going to do that prescribed fire on. So if that all comes together, it goes into a packet, it goes onto the front seat of my truck. The next day we go out to do the project. Marcia. So this is an example of this information that we submit to through a system called PEPRS, Prescribed Fire Information Reporting, to the Air Quality Management District. They actually send us a formal letter back, and I included this one because we include objectives as part of that report. We define what fuels we're going to burn, how we're going to burn them, when we're going to burn them. If we identify any potential areas that would be impacted by the smoke produced by the fire. But it's an example on the screen from the objectives in the letter that they write us back. Marcia. A huge part of all of our prescribed fire operations, and this is again part of the smoke management plan, is how we're going to handle public information. It is pretty interesting how many people that we notify just to make sure nobody's left out of the loop. So we use social media, we use our partners at the cities and towns to put out through their city managers newsletters. We use Facebook, Nextdoor, Twitter. We call a minimum of probably 5 agencies in the morning. We use our website. We use Nixle through our partners at the municipal police departments in the area. And we also put up signs. We have these sandwich board signs we'll put up on the roads that pass, so bicyclists and motorists can see what's going on. And then there's always, somebody that has special needs. The school district, we give them as much notice as we can about it. Morning of the burn, I'll oftentimes go into the school office, talk to the principal or talk to the superintendent or their facilities managers and say, hey, we're coming, everything okay? Students know, parents know, and they've been using their outreach mechanisms to get a hold of folks so nobody's surprised. Next slide, please. So how do we implement a project? Well, first, morning of, it's air quality in alignment. Are our partners, do we have the resources? Is the fuel moisture in, is it going to burn at all? In some cases, it's like, it's too wet, things aren't going to burn, or will it burn too hot? So again, we're looking at that prescription window and trying to hit the sweet spot there. What's the weather going to be? The temperature, we look at the relative humidity, the wind speed, the wind direction, the mixing height of the smoke. Part of the fire weather forecast that we get from the National Weather Services, our requirements from the Air Quality Management District is we need to have a mixing height of at least 500 feet. And that's so the smoke will rise above any structures around and get dispersed at least at that altitude. We're very fortunate here, unless there's an inversion or we have fog coming in. Generally, our mixing heights are well above that. So that's good. Are there adequate resources available? Again, can we get engines? Can we get the crews? Can we get folks to actually go out and do the work and support the logistics around that project? And are cooperating agencies able to support us? CAL FIRE, once fire season hits, they're a large organization, but they're spread very thin for a state this size. So if it's a SRA project, we like to have them with us. If their engines are, some other part of the state, they're generally not available. They have what's called resource drawdown. And if they get too low, then pretty much all prescribed fire operations get canceled. It's air quality and alignment. And then our local partners, able to support the project too, for whatever reasons. I've had, not here at MOFD, but I had a prescribed fire project all set up, ready to go in a former position I held. Resources were set, air was perfect, everything was good to go. And the neighbor called in and said, "Hey, my daughter's getting married on Saturday. You can't do that. She's getting married in our backyard." So those things come up and we try and accommodate them when we can. Next slide, please. Public information, as I said, is a huge part of what we do. These are some examples of posts for different projects that we put out there. The one with the really cool spinning image in the middle, the little video that's behind Donald Green School over in Moraga on the town of Moraga's project. We actually posted that during the burn with support from some of our communication support group. They were flying the drone and we were trying to tell the story of what we were actually burning out there. So it worked out very good. And we'll oftentimes post not only before to tell people what we're going to come out and burn, but during the burn so they can actually see what's going on. If they smell smoke, they'll go to our Facebook page or to Nextdoor and want to be able to look it up. And then after the burn, we say, hey, trying to say we're done for today and this is what we accomplished. Next slide, please. Part of getting started every morning is what we call a go, no go checklist. This is page 1 of it. Some of the special things here is, we'll reach out to like the school district who we talk to and document everything that we go through. If any of the items on this aren't favorable to burning, we, say everybody go home. We're done for today. We'll come back when things are in a better condition for burning. And then again, the other note, there's a burn boss contacted the school staff twice during the burn. So we just, again, it's important to us that if there are impacts that we can modify the burn or put things out and come back another day. Next slide, please. Some of the things that also go in the far left there is the part of that packet that goes on the front seat of my vehicle is the National Weather Service, the fire weather forecast for the burns. We also have a safety message to make sure that all the people that are working there, including our volunteers, know what the hazards are and how we're going to deal with them. And we also have a medical plan in case there's a mishap that we know have a very strict and available process for processing the medical emergency that would occur at one of our prescribed fire projects. And then we conduct, before we light that first pile or start that first drip torch, we conduct an operational briefing. This is a crew from CAL FIRE's National Guard crews out of Morgan Hill helping us with the project at Wagner Ranch. But the operational briefing generally consists of a firing, holding and mop-up plans. So it's not, at the end of the day, it's not like, okay, we're done burning, let's all go home. We have a contingency plan for, who's going to stay and who's going to watch this, how we're going to patrol it to make sure it doesn't rekindle or that the smoke isn't impacting a road or something. In the operational briefing, we'll cover the fire weather forecast, the anticipated / desired fire behavior. A lot of times in the understory burning, we're looking for flame heights less than 2 feet and a rate of spread, 1 to 2 feet per minute. So it's low intensity, fuel consuming fire behavior. We have a communications plan to make sure everybody's in the loop on what channel we're on, a safety message, logistics, a medical plan. We have a resource message. A lot of the areas that we're burning in, especially on East Bay mud lands, have some rare, threatened, and endangered species. So we'll have a resource advisor. Sometimes one of our biologists will come out. They'll do training before the burn to make sure everybody understands what's going on. We'll talk about what impacts that we anticipate the fire to have. And in some cases, that's one project that we did out towards Sleepy Hollow is we don't want to scorch these trees. And so we took extra measures to make sure that there was very little scorch on the oak trees that were part of that neighborhood's identity. Again, public information and at the end, we usually hand it over to the hosting agency administrator, whether that's East Bay Mud or the school district, or in some cases, Chief Winokur, to kind of give us a recap and the big picture of what they're seeing from the agency administrator role. During the burn, we use a number of things to monitor our smoke impacts. Far left is a screenshot of the purple air system. So when we're burning it, and I think that was from the Donald Green School project. We were actually monitoring purple air to see if everything green is good air quality. While we were burning, it remained good air quality, so things were good. I have gone to, especially at schools, because those are super sensitive, down to the school grounds and taken pictures back of where we're burning. So that next picture over is from Wagner Ranch, looking back at the pile burning operation that we did. And then we've flown our drones, our UAS, to document what the smoke is doing to make sure that we're getting that smoke rising above the community. The district has also been fortunate enough to acquire an EBAM, which is an air quality monitor, and we set that up in schoolyards. We had it running last winter when East Bay Mud was burning log decks, and we wanted to show the air quality management district that we could successfully burn those without impacting our air basin. Next slide, please. Some other tools that we use, there's a very elaborate system of alert wildfire cameras. The picture on the far left is the San Pablo Reservoir, behind the reservoir burning log decks, and we were able to monitor that prescribed fire operation with East Bay Mud 24/7 by just setting the camera on it, and you can watch the time lapse of those log decks burning back there. And again, very little smoke impacts coming from that. There's a couple of characters flying our UAS there.
Where's the guy on the right?
Yeah, handsome guy, isn't he? But again, that was one of our school projects where we were able to document the smoke impacts and take some videos and pictures for social media to put out to the public so people knew what we were doing. Captain Marquardt has a UAS that actually has IR capabilities. So the spots that are around there that are red show piles that are still hot, again, behind Donald Green School. And that would allow us to go back and make sure that those were mopped up or make sure that they weren't creeping. There's very little chance of escape there, but the potential for someone saying, hey, I still see smoke, and calling dispatch and requiring an engine to respond was real there. Above that is our Terra Torch that's burning log decks behind San Pablo Reservoir. Again, another MOFD specialized tool that we use to get those large fuels started. And then the last picture over there, kind of on the far left upper, is our remote automated weather station that we've got set up above Camino Pablo and Wildcat Canyon Road. That's looking at current weather conditions. We provide that information to the National Weather Service, and they use it to hone our fire weather forecast for all of our projects. So what does it look like when we're done? So upper left is Wagner Ranch Nature Area before. Below that is the piles that were made by those National Guard crews. They were covered with our pile burning paper and left to dry. We came back in the middle of winter and ignited those piles. And while that's not Wagner Ranch Nature Area, above that last picture in the center there, that's very representative of what it looks like now. It's a very open landscape. Fire danger there will stay on the ground, will allow our people to get in there and suppress fire, protecting the nature area and protecting the school and the homes around it. This is kind of a special picture that's behind Station 42. The crew there took it on themselves to do some brush clearing, and we did some pile burning, did some reseeding. And if you get a chance, you should go back there. It's filled with wildflowers. It's really pretty amazing, the transition there. So take a little work to keep it maintained. There's been some encroachment of some species that aren't so good. We've got some broom coming back in there and some other things, but I think with a little bit of work, we'll be able to make that a really nice place for people to visit, to see that if you do the mitigation work, fire is not necessarily a bad thing. We get back to a more native California landscape and a fire adapted ecosystem that's much more fire safe. Oh, I'm sorry, 44. Sorry, Chief. Yeah, so off Moraga Way. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. That's the end of my report.
Do we do burning private property, like a property owner can request to burn their property if, you know, if you have a substantial property?
We have, and again, we look at it as prescribed fire is a tool. So the property owner would need to demonstrate to us that it's not practical to haul that many tons of material off the hill down the street to the chipper. And make a case for that. We've done that for homeowners associations in some pretty remote areas, in some cases for private property owners. We've been able to use funds from Measure X to pay for the crews to do that work.
And there's two nuances there. One is that's typically pile burning, where it's a large parcel, it's strategically located, and there's an outsized and obvious community benefit to reducing the fuels there, and the amount of work that would get done, sometimes significantly in excess of the requirements. A particularly good example, just south of 24 and sort of central Orinda there's an 18-acre parcel that almost completely occupies a large bowl that, unsurprisingly, for years and years, no work had been done. The fire code requirements or the ordinance requirements now, 2303 and 2304, are 100 feet from the home and 100 feet from the property line. That left an awful lot of this parcel outside the scope of our requirements. So working with the landowner and with PG&E, because there's some PG&E lines that could across there, we were able to identify an opportunity that if they cut and piled in conjunction with PG&E cut and piled, they were willing to significantly exceed the requirements of our ordinances, because if we burned the piles, it was going to be the same amount of cost and effort for them to create clearance on almost all of the property as it would have been had they limited their efforts to just the 100 feet and had to haul all that material in a couple places a half mile down to the roadside where it could then be chipped. And so that was, and there's a clear community benefit with overhanging homes at the top of the bowl all around. And so that was an opportunity where there was a clear public benefit to pile burning as a way to get the homeowner, or the property owner in this case, to do work that significantly exceeded our requirements. And that's been a discussion we've had with several HOAs and others. With regard to broadcast burning, there are almost no privately owned parcels that are appropriate for that we have not already identified and put fire on the ground. It's really difficult to put fire on the ground within the broadcast fire within the community proper because of the smoke mitigation efforts. It also is very expensive because of all the control lines that need to be put in advance, and the requirements for control lines go up based on proximity to structures. And so for broadcast burning, our work there has largely been based either with an HOA or a public landowner who is able to put forward the resources to create the control lines, or that those areas fell within a fuel break project where, as our last step, we always put in control lines around the work units as we leave the fuel break project to set conditions for future maintenance with use of fire. So I would like to be very cautious about that the easy button to say, the fire department just can burn it, that button does not exist. And for broadcast burning, there are few, if any, areas that I'm aware of where we could burn that we have not already explored that with the property owner or controller. And for pile burning, there needs to be the resident or the owner creates the piles. We burn them, but there has to be a nexus to outsized community benefit. Otherwise, the better answer is to cut and haul, windrow, chip, and either broadcast or haul is a better use of the resources.
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks.
Ideally, how many burn days would the district like if it was possible?
I don't think presently burn days are not our limiting factor. It's generally crew availability and project readiness. There's like you saw, there's quite a process to get the projects kind of on the drawing board through that process. And then we create a window. And right now, we're looking at the second week in June to do several projects at that point. We've got crews lined out, scheduled. Nothing comes up, we'll be able to do it. I attended the Bay Area Air Quality Management District's board meeting where they did their review of prescribed fire. And they were there, the number that they were given was over 200 days a year are permissive burn days.
Wow.
But that depends on the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was last year. So.
I have one detailed question, but I want to proceed it with a comment, which is that I know that you folks are always going to take some complaints by folks who are concerned about whether these are safe and whether they're producing a whole lot of smoke or not. My guess is that those are mostly people who have not been on the scene of these controlled burns. I remember a couple of years ago when we did one out at the Wagner Ranch. There's a chain link fence that separates the parking lot from the area being burned. And while the burn was going on, a group of Boy Scouts showed up. And I think Battalion Chief Galen or one of the other, maybe it was Lucas Lambert, were on the scene. And the Boy Scouts and some of their parents were fascinated by this project. The flames were about 3 inches high. The smoke was virtually non-existent. They were able to, by being on the other side of the chain link fence, observe the whole process, and nobody was inhaling smoke. And I think that all of those Boy Scouts and their parents went home with stories that are pretty much like, oh my gosh, how cool is this? So I just want to commend all of you guys. I don't know what other folks in other departments across the state or the country are doing, but I suspect, based upon my own experience and having had the privilege to help out with 15 or 20 of these, that you do a tremendous job of doing it. You should be commended, encouraged to keep it up. And the only suggestion I would be making is, I think it's in all of our interest to include as many members of the public on the scene, and they look at the control lines, they look at the virtually non-existent smoke, and they're going to be spreading the same kind of stories of commendation that this department's doing a tremendous job with these things. And my question was, is the EBAM calibrated yet? I know
It is.
it is.
It's up and
And
running.
Perrin saved the department something like $4,000 or $5,000 by hunting down a rental for $100 as
Yeah.
opposed to what was one. So I want to commend the support division too, and the work that those people do, and the amount of money that they're saving our taxpayers.
Very good. Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you. And just to close, for 2022-23, we burned about 320 piles in the district and about 52 acres of broadcast burning. In 23-24, we've got 7 projects that we think, depending on which ones come into prescription and which ones are supportable, we'll have about 7 projects for 100+ acres in the district, and the number of piles keeps going up. So we'll keep after it. I appreciate your support. And I know I went long today, but I really appreciate
It was worth
the
it.
board's putting up with me. So thank you.
Thank you.
I would just like to put an emphasis that lot behind 44 that you see on the right, which is in bloom, as well as Bear Ridge at Tappan Lane, those are 2 of the only native grass meadows now in the East Bay. I believe Bear Ridge is still in bloom. It's quite a sight with that wildflower mix, and what was previously just a decadent, overgrown coyote brush covered scrubby hill has turned into a really verdant meadow at the current time. Next, we'll have the operations update with Battalion Chief Lucas Lambert.
All right, thank you, Chief Winokur. Good evening, Board of Directors and members of the public. I'm Lucas Lambert, Battalion Chief with Moraga-Orinda Fire District. I'll be giving tonight's operations update. Just to check on communications, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, start with our next slide. Beginning with our this year's annual hydrant maintenance across our district, firefighters have been out and about throughout our community, painting fire hydrants, painting hydrant gate pods in the streets, ensuring that our hydrants are visible and in good working order. In total, it's estimated that within our district, there's approximately 1,500 hydrants that our firefighters have completed and continue to do so each year. I'm happy to announce that that we have completed this year's annual fire maintenance of the hydrants. Next slide. On May 3rd, representatives from El Cerrito Fire Department, Berkeley, City of Oakland, Contra Costa County, and CAL FIRE joined together our team in Orinda for a simulated fire that could affect our communities. Staff engaged in mutual aid discussions about how we can work to collectively together in the event we are faced with a rapid moving wildland fire that threatens our communities. And this slide here is are some of the members that participated. Leading the discussion was Battalion Chief Steve Gailing, as he led the discussion in planning for resource for the next operational period. Next slide. With the assistance of fire modeling software, we were able to provide a simulation of vegetation fire with extreme fire weather conditions. These conditions were set to simulate a fire that started off of San Pablo Dam Road with an eastern fern wind blowing toward the communities of El Cerrito and Berkeley. Representatives organized discussion on how to anticipate needs before an actual incident and how to request resources through the use of the California Mutual Aid system. Crews exercise radio communications, staging locations, and evacuation procedures through the implementation of the incident command system. We'd like to thank everyone that was able to participate that day. I think it held a very healthy discussion before the incident and really before we kick off our fire season. So thank you for the participants. Next slide. And like many other months, I would be remiss if I did not mention the volume of emergencies that our firefighters continue to respond to on the roadways. Adverse driving conditions, distracted drivers, and speed continue to be common denominators with vehicle accidents throughout our roadways in our district. As with many previous board meetings, I want to remind our public to slow down, avoid handheld wireless devices, and yield to emergency responders that may be assisting with emergencies on our roadways. Next slide. And as we heard from our emergency preparedness coordinator, Dennis Rain, our firefighters partnered with Contra Costa County Fire to complete prescribed burn in the area of Wagner Ranch. This project was conducted to reduce wildfire hazards and improve conditions for native vegetation surrounding the area. MOFD coordinated this project with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, as Dennis had mentioned, to ensure the prescription was within standard and smoke mitigation was in place. This project was completed and it was returned with reduced vegetation, just as emergency preparedness coordinator Dennis Rain had mentioned. And here's some additional photos of that project. Next slide. This picture was a picture of obviously a vehicle fire on Highway 24 at night. This incident occurred approximately 11:30 p.m. Just a few hours later in the early mornings on April 29th, crews responded to assist Confire with vehicle accident off the roadway on Highway 24 eastbound near the Pleasant Hill off-ramp. Upon arrival, crews found a single vehicle approximately 50 feet down a hill and off the roadway. Precautions were taken to slow the volume of traffic to allow for emergency personnel working off of the roadway. Shortly after our crews and Confire's crews arrived on scene, the second arriving battalion chief from Confire was struck by a passenger vehicle, putting him into the guardrail on the right-hand shoulder. Crews attended now to both scenes and were able to mitigate both the vehicle accident that we were originally responding to and the second accident that was caused by a passenger vehicle with our neighboring battalion chief. This accident is still under investigation. The vehicle is believed to be a total loss of the Contra Costa County Fire's battalion chief. I put this picture up obviously to show an incident that we responded to. I don't have the incident or any incident pictures of the next incident that I spoke of, being that it is still under investigation. But As a constant reminder to us and to our public, our roadways are very dangerous. Highway 24, for the small area that we do cover, I can't remind everyone enough to please slow down, pay attention, and avoid distractions. Next slide. And next, we'd like to thank everyone that joined us at our open house at Station 45 in Orinda on May 13th. Crews engaged with our community to show off our equipment to those that were able to visit our stations. Crews cooked hot dogs, hamburgers on the barbecue pit that was handmade by one of our firefighters. Special thanks to those that made the event possible, including representatives from the La Miranda CERT, CAL FIRE, MOFD, communications volunteers, Rescue One, and the MOPFA. These events are always fun. And as I mentioned previously in other ops updates, through the years of the COVID restrictions, these are the things that we enjoy the most of engaging with our public and community, and to open our doors to the public and explain what we do as firefighters. Next slide. And finally, we'd like to give a special thanks to the Wilson family for their generous donation to the Rescue One Foundation. Mimi Wilson and her family made the donation on behalf of our former MOFD Board of Director, Pete Wilson, her late husband. Pete served on the MOFD board from 7/1/97 to 2/18/2010. The Rescue One Foundation was able to provide our firefighters with 2 cardiac field monitors that we will be able to put into service this season. The monitors will be able to equip our firefighters with the latest EMS field monitor that is compact and light enough to carry with us on the fire line. As you can see there at the bottom, right in the center, we officially named this the Pete Pack, and there's a commemorative plaque that's mounted on the device to recognize former MOFD Board of Director Pete Wilson. Thank you to Mimi and her family, the Wilson family, for your donations. Next slide. And pending any questions, this concludes tonight's operational report. Thank you.
Any questions?
Just want to say thank you,
Thank
Chief.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We can open public comment for the announcements. We do not have any hands raised. Oh, we do have one hand raised. Dan Elbana.
Hi, good evening. Just to clarify the public comment for the announcements, is this for all the updates that were just given?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Dan Albana, Moraga-Orinda Fire Captain and union member, our union representative. I'd like to thank the board for the time so I could speak. I just want to speak real quickly on our interview and hiring process. I just want to give a little bit of context of kind of where we stand with, I believe, with 2 down, we're at like 33 applicants this year. Last year, I believe we have somewhere around 40, 42. And of those 40-ish applicants we currently are only having 1 in academy. We did have a lot of injuries. So 2 of the 3 that we tried to hire are injured. And I do believe one of them we are bringing on for the next academy next year. So of the 42-ish applicants we had last year, we're still very hopeful that we'll get 2 of them. So with that said, with only 33 applicants and our need to hire with anticipated retirements, injuries, and kind of unexpected retirements that we've had, that that number 33 is not a particularly great number. Now, we're very, very hopeful that this group will get a lot of really good candidates, and hopefully somewhere around 10 that we want to offer jobs to, and see how that goes, the background investigations, everything that happens. But when you're looking to hire and the stress of putting people through academy, background investigations, everything associated with it, the number 33, when we're trying to hire even, 3-4 candidates, is not a particularly good number. I'm not going to speak specifically to why our numbers are so low, but there are obvious signs of areas that affects this. how we advertise for it, our compensation in the immediate market, just the makeup of our department, where may have you. There's lots of different things that factor in how many applicants we got and currently get. But I just want to caution everybody and just temper our excitement with that. We have 33 applicants. When we had 42, we've only got one that we're currently making its way through Academy and hopefully to get online. Again, we're still going to get the best out of these 33. We're not going to lower our standards just to hire people. Our standards will stay as high as they are. But I just, again, it's hard to hire and there's a lot of different reasons that go into it. And 33, we're hopeful, but we might not get the amount of members that we think we need to hire. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
We do not have any more hands raised or received written public comment.
Okay. Move on to item 9, the consent agenda. Is there anything that any of the directors have that they want pulled?
I'd like to pull 9.2.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, can we proceed then with approval of 9.1, 3, 4, and 5? Is there a motion to approve those?
I move to approve 9.1, 9.3, 9.4, and 9.5.
Second.
We can open public comment on the motion. We do not have any hands raised or received public comment. Take a vote.
A vote.
Director Danziger,
Aye.
Director Hassler.
Aye.
Director Romer,
Aye.
Director Jex.
Aye. 9.2.
Thank you. The reason I pulled that, I just wanted to talk a little about, have a little discussion on the response time report. The discrepancy between the EMS rescue response times in Moraga versus Orinda. Quite a difference in time and also with Canyon, but I really understand Canyon. So I just wanted to, maybe hear from Chief or Operations Chief about responding to EMS in Orinda. And my guess is it's a result of the ambulance having to come from Station 45 in Orinda, from Moraga to go to Orinda. But I'd just like to hear what you would have to say about the discrepancy between the response times in Moraga and Orinda.
Would you explain your guess again, sir? I didn't, I missed
Well,
the
I'm
last
just
part.
thinking that the response time is higher in Orinda because the ambulance comes from Moraga.
It does not. It comes from
Okay.
Station 45 in Orinda.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so yeah, so the ambulance is there. So what accounts for the difference in the response times by so much? I mean,
I'd have to review the calls. This could be issues such as the slide on Wildcat Canyon, which means our responses to Tilden. And some areas in the north are delayed. It could be conjunction with the freeway responses with the recent rains and the requirement to go up, turn around and come back. It could be a variety of things. I'd be hesitant to speculate without researching the underlying fundamentals of the 70 calls that made up that response time and then giving that some historical context to determine if there's a seasonality to it.
okay, but yeah, it seemed, I guess it just seemed more glaring this month but you're right, it could be something like that with only 70 calls, I guess it doesn't take a lot to.
I don't know, but I'll certainly research it and come back with more information. Sir.
That's fine.
Okay, can we have a motion to approve 9.2?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve 9.2.
Second.
Roll call.
We need to open public comment on that motion. We do not have any hands raised or received written public comment. Director Danziger,
Aye.
Director Hassler,
Aye.
Director Romer,
Aye.
Director Jex.
Aye. Okay, item 10. Adopt resolution 2311.
Good evening, directors. Next item before you, item 10.1, adoption of resolution 23-11 of the Moraga-Orinda Fire Protection District, appointing the board members of the Board of Directors as members of the Board of Appeals. This is our last cleanup item from the 2019 Fire Code. What we had done previously in the Fire Code was have the hearing. The board would hear cases, the exterior hazard abatement, as well as fire code issues specific to the building standards code that are found in Title 24, Part 9, which is known as California Fire Code. Because we removed the exterior hazard abatement and the hearing process for exterior hazard abatement out of the fire code, we needed to establish the board as a Board of Appeals. If anything came up, for example, if we required sprinklers in a building and somebody wanted to appeal that, this is specific for appeals to issues of the California Fire Code. So working with District Council, we created a resolution, and attached to that resolution is hearing procedures where the board would function as a hearing officer if somebody wanted to appeal something out of the fire code. That concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Any questions?
Would those appeals happen at a regular board meeting?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Do you have public comments?
We do not have any public comment or written public comment.
We can invite a motion to approve.
I move to approve 10.1 as stated. Second.
Can they have a public comment?
So we do not have any public comment on the motion.
Okay, then could we have a vote?
Director Danziger.
Aye.
Director Hassler.
Aye.
Director Romer.
Aye.
Director Jex.
Aye. Move on to 10.2.
Good evening, directors. The district's annual comprehensive financial report has been prepared. On May 2nd, the draft report was sent to all board members with a request to submit any changes or edits to the report to staff. All changes submitted by board members have been incorporated into the draft report, which is included in the board packet tonight as item 10.2, attachment A. As detailed in the staff report, a significant post-balance sheet event has been disclosed, reporting Sisera investment losses of minus 10.5% in calendar year 2022, resulting in net underperformance of approximately 17.25%. This significant post-balance sheet event has been disclosed in 6 different areas of the draft report as detailed in the staff report with item 10.2. Also, projected future Sisera pension rate increases due to the investment losses have been disclosed through fiscal year 2027 as a percentage of payroll, which is how Sisera provides the information to the district. In order to give the reader context regarding the projected percentage increases that Sisera provided, the projected cost of a 1% increase in the Sisera rate was calculated by staff at $115,000 and disclosed in the report. Next, Chief Winokur is going to provide additional information regarding the Sisera disclosures. Then we will hear from the audit manager, Tarek Radwan with Ida Bailey, who is here in person this evening.
Thank you, Gloria. Good evening, directors. I 2 things I would like to call the director's attention to. One is that for a variety of reasons beyond the district's control, the audit was delayed this year. This was normally an item we would have received 5 months ago. And because of the delay in the audit, obviously other things continue to progress to include Sisera's early, and they caveat in their letter, approximate or estimated increases in our pension costs, which would not normally be included in the prior year audit because the information would not have been available at the date the audit was concluded, and that information, which will be formalized as things such as venture capital returns and so forth are known, will be received in its final form around October, according to their normal cadence, and will be included in next year's audit, which we hope to receive towards the end of the calendar year, back in accordance with our normal schedule. That said, as Glorianne mentioned, the significant post-report event has been disclosed in numerous places, and staff has taken a further look using the GovInvest software to try to understand the implications on both the district's unfunded pension liability and on the district's near-term pension obligations. And I think it's important to note that those are two very different things, and because of smoothing, the impact of a single year's loss on the pension liability is relatively muted because the full effect will not be seen for several years. And in the same way, and that number is also largely hypothetical, and it will go up and it will go down as market returns go up and go down as well. On the other hand, the district's actual pension costs, which we know for next year with absolute certainty, and we have a very good estimate of future years going out to 29 by virtue of the letter we recently received in March from Cicera. Those have an actual impact on the district's pension costs in the current or in the upcoming fiscal year, which is included in the budget that the board will have an opportunity to provide direction on in the later item tonight. And that I believe the disclosures included in the audit and the inclusion in the budget of the increases that the district will see as a result of the losses, and then how those are expressed through smoothing, which has a real dollar near-term effect on the district's finances, on the district's budget, is a more accurate way of understanding the impact of Cicera's underperformance on our budget. As I said, we've taken a look at this in a number of ways, and we have sought through the additional disclosures in the letter of transmission and the MD&A, as well as in the body of the report, to be as transparent as we can with the information that is known, and the information that, because it is known, is appropriate to include as a post-report event in the audit. I'd be happy to answer any questions or turn it over to the auditor, who can provide further context and answer the board's questions.
I appreciate what was done because as you indicated, because of the lateness of the audit. But once the audit will be dated, their letter is dated, after we got this information. And so the issue obviously is what the real number is, and that is kind of hard to determine based on what information we have. Other than the fact that what they did disclose to us is that for 4 years, they earned 4%. And if you look at the disclosure that we have in the report on page 57, the current number is 10.772. A 1% decrease in that to 575, the unfunded pension liability goes up to 41 million. And so when we have 5 years of underperformance, dramatic underperformance, that number could be huge. And one indication that there is the fact that our 2024 contribution went up by 29% over what it was previously. And that is over 7 million, what is it, $300,000, which is disclosed. So that is one of the issues, a long-term issue that we're going to face in terms of how that, what Cirrus is going to bill us. We know that it's going to be more than the 7 million going forward, at least for a few years. So turn it over to you for.
I just want to emphasize that the liability or the investments basically is impacted by the the general investment market, which is impacted everywhere on the whole economy. When we see that in Cicera, we see it in CalPERS, CalSTRS, and all the pension pools all over the country. So this is not something specific for Cicera. And the economists, they are saying that the market will flip, just like they flipped in 21, flipped in 22, and hopefully after, we pass this COVID consequences in a few years, that will be going back. So that's for sure will impact the pension liability, which is presented here as required supplementary schedule in page 63. And I think that was the purpose of showing a history of 10 years. So the financial statement reader can determine and see the trend of how the liability is moving forward and what is the history. So whenever there is a special event like COVID time, or say drastic change in this investment market, you can notice it as a flux in the RSI schedule.
Yeah, I think one of the things with Saris is the timing.
Mhm.
The numbers that we're looking at for this year,
Mhm.
were really, but 3 years ago
Mhm.
determined. Things have changed,
For sure.
and that was the issue in regards to post balance sheet events.
Yeah.
Confirming that numbers may be different.
Yeah, it has changed and it will change. And we cannot really speculate at this point. We just rely on the whatever the actuary reports are giving us, and on the investment reports provided by Cicera. So it seems like the director's concern is the change between today and when we're going to issue the report. Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
That's why the post balance sheet event
Yeah.
occurred during that period.
Yeah.
Normally, the report would have been issued back in December 2022.
From audit perspective, we look at this as, is it material to the financial statements or not? Because at the end of the day, it's an estimate. It's an accounting estimate. And there is always a factor of minor error in the accounting estimates. So, of course, before we issue the report, we're going to consider that change, and we look at it if it's significant to the financial statement or not. If not, we will post or make some changes to the numbers.
Well, I guess you're here to present the report as
Yes.
drafted.
I'm happy to present the report and answer any financial statement
Okay.
questions. Yeah. So let me talk quickly about our audit report, the report we did this year. So the scope of the financial audit is to provide a reasonable assurance that the financial statements are fairly stated in all material respects and in compliance with the generally accepted accounting standards. I would like to emphasize that the financial statements are the responsibility of the management. We conducted our financial statements audit by performing various tests and audit procedures to obtain audit evidence about the amounts and disclosures in the financial statements, as well as we gain an understanding of the internal controls on the major operation cycles, such as cash receipts, cash disbursements, payroll, and purchasing. We confirmed the significant balances in the financial statements, such as the cash and investments, and perform adequate procedures to ensure the balances or on receivables, capital assets, and payables are fairly stated. Also, we assisted in drafting the financial statements and the footnotes in compliance with the accounting standards. On the conclusion of the audit, we will issue our audit opinion report stating whether the financial statements are fairly stated, and also whether we noted any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in the internal controls. And I'm pleased to let you know that as far as today, we are going to issue a clean report in all these aspects, which means the district financial statements are fairly stated and no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses were noted during our audit. And with that, I'll be more than happy to answer any financial report questions.
So when will your report be dated?
We are estimating that should be by next week, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the partner supposedly should be signing it by early next week.
There was just one really small revision is There is a page where you refer to the Menlo Park Fire Protection District.
Oh, okay.
It's probably just a cut and a paste, but
Mhm.
it was on
Page
it was on a
one.
letter, page one, really.
It's in the opinion. The opinion
Oh, opinion,
refers
okay,
to
yeah.
on both
Oh,
page
on
one
that-
and two.
Yep.
It's referred to in the third bullet on page two as well.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments to the auditor?
So I'm from what you said, President Jack, so I mean, we know about this significant payments to Cesara coming up. Is that going to be in the audit or?
Yes.
So it will be because we have the information.
It's disclosed.
Yeah, it's not in the body of the financial.
It's not in the
statements.
financial statements, but it's a
Yeah, it's disclosed as
disclosure.
Got
a
it.
subsequent event.
Okay.
It happened after year end.
Okay,
Information came to the board. It's the letter that we got
right.
from Cirrus.
But that's the payment
The-
only that is in there, correct? The $7 million.
Disclosure.
Yeah.
But as well as disclosure regarding the underperformance.
Yes.
Causing the increase in the unfunded pension liability dramatically.
Yeah.
Which we'll learn about this year.
Yep.
Hopefully
It'll
Yeah.
be in next year's.
next year.
So in 21 fiscal year, the liability dropped because the investment was boomed by almost 40-50%. And the reversed in 22. That's why it panicked everybody.
See, that's what I was saying. The numbers that are in there are all pre-COVID numbers
Correct.
in terms of performance. Everybody knows the market crashed after that
Yeah.
and still crashed.
Yeah.
And that's what will impact those numbers prospectively will be very different.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So it seems like in doing your audit, I mean, just reading through this, our staff, financial staff they provided everything they needed to do. Everything was.
Correct. Actually, the staff was very cooperative. Glorian was on top of our requests. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you so much for being very helpful.
And no deficiencies were noted, right? I think.
No material weaknesses or deficiencies. We actually, we are not opining on the internal controls, but we consider them during our audit. So during our tests and procedures, we didn't note any significant deficiencies or anything like that to be like warrant to be reported to the board.
okay, well, we appreciate your comments and appreciate your being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Appreciate it.
directors. Thank you.
Thank you for your service to our district over these years, and I know we're not going to be seeing you next year, so.
Thank you.
Okay, we can invite public comment. Any questions from the public?
We do not have any hands raised or received written public comments.
Okay, then can we have a motion to accept the audit?
Yeah, I'll motion that we accept the audit. As drafted.
We'll invite comment on the motion. We do not have any comment. Director Danziger,
Aye.
Director Hasler.
Aye.
Director Romer.
Aye.
Director Jeff.
Aye. Okay, we move on to item 10.3, proposed operating budget.
Good evening, directors. A proposed budget has been prepared. This is the second step in the public budget process. Tonight's the second public meeting to discuss the proposed budget. Last month, a public board budget workshop was held. Tonight is an opportunity for additional public input and additional board direction. The budget is scheduled for adoption at the June board meeting, which is best business practice. The latest date the budget can be adopted is October. Last month, during the board budget workshop, the board made two requests. The first was to change the board of directors section. This has been included in the agenda as a separate agenda item 10.7. The second request was for a balance sheet, which was included in the board packet as attachment B with this item. The proposed budget includes general fund revenue of $34.9 million, general fund expenditures of $32.4 million, a transfer out of the general fund to the capital projects fund for the Station 41 construction project. This results in a general fund budgeted deficit of $460,000 as listed on the slide. I want to make it clear that the benefits expenditures have included in the budget include the new Cicera rates that are set for fiscal year 23-24. The new rates increased 10.45% over the prior. Next slide. Many of the district's expenditures are required based on contractual, operational, or legal requirements. The non-discretionary expenditures are detailed on the slide and total $28.5 million. Some expenditures are not mandatory, however, represent a continuation of effort, and they're listed on this slide, which total $6.9 million. The proposed budget includes expanded service in fire prevention to provide home hardening grants to residents in the amount of $500,000, which is included. This slide shows the authorized positions that are included in the draft budget. The budget includes funding for safety roster strength of 57 safety positions, plus 4 chief officers, and daily staffing of 17 safety positions in the fire stations. The draft budget includes adding 1 new position compared to last year, which is an office specialist position in fire prevention to support the additional efforts and work that's going on in fire prevention at a cost of $132,000. So that's total salaries and benefits for that position. Chief Winokur will highlight some of the goals for the year that are included and listed on this slide for operations and other divisions.
Good evening, directors. Under emergency operations, we have 2 goals. One is the replacement of our SCBAs. This is a life safety environment, a life safety piece of equipment that allows our firefighters to operate in a LDH environment. And our SCBAs are coming to the end of their expected service life. In addition, there have been significant advances in the technology, and we look forward to seeing the next generation of SCBAs put into service. Continue the work to develop our GIS program. This is being run by engineer Steve Rognes, who has done an excellent job of coming up with ways to graphically depict the work we are doing, which is helpful not only for communication with the board and with members of our community, but it's also very helpful for analysis to understand where we have, where there are trends, where there are opportunities for improvement, and the insights that the graphic depiction provides are tremendously helpful, particularly given how lean we are in that particular area. It also is helpful for our suppression members to gain a common understanding of the operating environment through those depictions. Within support services, as previously discussed, we anticipate beginning our Station 41 project with more to follow on that. And our station alerting systems, or Zetrons, the ring down systems, are at the end of their service life and have become or are becoming obsolete. And in coordination with other agencies within the county and our primary and secondary PSAPs for dispatch, we'll be moving to update and replace the station alerting systems to ensure we have reliable ring down, which is the critical first step to ensuring the firefighters in the station are aware of the emergency. There's simply nothing worse as a firefighter to hear an engine go by your station code 3 to your call that you weren't aware of because of failure of the system. Within emergency medical services, we'll continue updating our infectious control plan. This is obviously a long-term and sustained effort that has been particularly enhanced as we work through the pandemic, and then increase our offerings of in-house EMS training that's critical for the maintenance of certification and licensure for our paramedics and EMTs to be able to continue to operating in our EOA. For apparatus, we propose ordering 2 new Type 1 fire engines. This is somewhat time sensitive for several reasons. One, there's a 36 to 41 month lag time from order to delivery on fire engines. 2, in 2027, there'll be the implementation of new federal emission standards. The last time we saw federal emission standards go into effect for fire engines associated with the regen, and we quickly discovered in the fire service that regeneration systems designed for long haul truckers, where somewhere between Omaha and Topeka, the regen would kick in and the engine would run a little hotter for that time and it didn't bother anybody. That doesn't work when you're running fire engines on short, high intensity runs in the urban environment where those engines are being run hard from a cold start by virtue of our response. And there are many fire stations at one time that had burned vegetation along the edge of the front ramp from where an engine was regenning, or engines would need to regen at the moment the call was received. Those systems and issues have been worked out, and fire service specific applications were developed over time. We would really like to avoid being in the first generation of new emission systems. And placing an order in the current time would keep us ahead of that pending 2027 requirement, and the new motors and new systems will have to be engineered to meet it. It also is reflective of the aging nature of our fleet, and that we have some engines that are due for replacement. Certainly will be due for replacement within the 3 to 3.5 year timeframe that it'll take to receive the new engines that we recommend approving purchase. And then with the proposed Fire Station 41 development, there continues the developing the plans for our sorely needed training center that has always been a shortcoming of the district, a place where we were able to carry out training in a realistic and dynamic environment, which we currently lack. That will require some effort to build out the plans and begin acquiring the equipment that we need to build out the training center associated with the new fire station.
Hey, Chief, just a question. You were talking about apparatus. Is there any such thing as either hybrid or electric fire engines?
Yes, sir, there are.
There are.
Uh-huh.
Is that going to be something we're going to look into, or?
They're not within our price range. Number one. And
Okay.
number two, they come with some real limitations with regard to range, infrastructure, et cetera. And they are absolutely in their infancy as far as new technology. I think there will come a time where our equipment is run in that manner. But a fire engine is, they're large. They need to be able to move very quickly within a relatively confined area, small district. On the other hand, they need to be able to run for hours at a time when they're conducting pumping operations on a fire. So long, in some cases, that you have to bring fuel trucks to the engines that are pumping, that are specifically, I think of several multi-alarm fires in the Emeryville, Oakland border that I was the IC for, where those engines could not be moved because they were supporting just a labyrinth of pumping operations with all manner of hoses everywhere that were simply unmovable. And they had been pumping for so long, fighting the fire, that they were running their full fuel tanks. 50-gallon tanks were running down, and we needed to bring mobile refueling to them in order to sustain our operations. As with, I'm sure with time, battery and hybrid technology will develop to the point that we could swap out or something like that. But in the current environment, it would be particularly challenging if we had extended operations and we had a requirement for a battery to be able to power the pump throughout that period.
Okay.
Chief, so we are ordering, or we want to order apparatus that are right before the fuel standards change,
Yes,
or right after? Okay, right before.
Yes, sir. We'd like to, our window is
Not
tight.
the new adopter.
Yes, sir. And in time, that technology be worked out, new motors, new systems are being developed, and I'm sure in time they'll get it right.
Okay.
But I would strongly suggest and recommend through this budget that we stay ahead of the first generation. And our apparatus needs are such that it would not be prudent to wait the 2, 3, 4 years for the new technology to get the bugs out before we place an order for these apparatus.
If I'm correct, we're going to place the order in fiscal 24
Yes, sir.
or 23,
I'd like to place the order July 1st.
July 1st. So that is all in the budget.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, because it's what, about $2
$2 million
Each or?
total, $1 million apiece, which is
Okay.
significant increase. Not very long ago, these were a lot less. We are also concerned about continuing inflation on a very specialized equipment that is intense in equipment and components that are in short supply.
And since we're talking on budget, I mean, we're replacing 2 now. What's the pipeline look like for others that need replacement in the time frame?
The district made a major apparatus purchase in 2017. So our fleet with receiving those 2 rigs, our fleet will be in good shape. Our type 3s are aging, but in good shape and don't see nearly the use. But the frontline type 1s, and then the truck obviously was purchased in conjunction with the new engines. Getting those vehicles purchased will put our frontline type 1 fleet in good shape and should we should not have an apparatus requirement for some time.
Right, there's about 3 more slides. So for administration goals, I won't read them all, but the big highlight ones are expand the home hardening grant program, complete labor negotiations, transition to new auditors, and continue to diversify the investment portfolio. The draft budget includes the capital projects listed on the slide, which total $9.4 million. You can see there's for Station 41 construction for $5.8 million. And then that's the 2 Type 1 engines for $2.2 million is included in the budget, along with those other projects. This is the last slide. Board direction is requested regarding the proposed budget, which will be brought back to the board at the June meeting for adoption. This concludes the presentation.
Any comments, questions, recommendations, from any of the board?
Just making sure the $500,000 we saw in there, that is the upgrade for the alerting system that we were talking about, right? That needs replacement at all the stations throughout. Okay.
I just make a comment. I just think staff has done a terrific job on this year's budget. Thank you.
Agreed.
I'd like to invite public comment then.
Jacob Barola.
Good evening, directors. My name is Jacob Barola, 1230 representative. The firefighters support the home hardening grants. We support hardening their homes. And we encourage everyone in the district to take measures to be prepared and reduce fire threats about their property. However, it should not be the district's money to fund these grants. Providing grants with MOFD taxpayer dollars could be seen as an appropriation of public funds for private use. This type of grant funding could also be seen as unfair to taxpayers who may not be eligible to receive the same benefits. Lastly, and as I mentioned before, this is one of the most affluent communities in the county, if not the state, and should not be subsidized with taxpayer dollars. If the board decides to continue using tax dollars in this manner, we ask there be a clear use for these funds. Last year, the $500,000, which was just a number created out of thin air, was designated for ember-resistant screens, and of that, only $25,000 were realized. A total of $75,000 was spent. $50,000 in material sits at 41 waiting to be used. The budget is being passed with a general fund deficit of over $459,000, and reconsidering this grant would balance the budget. Thank you.
Appreciate your comment.
We do not have any hands raised, and we do not have any written public comment.
Okay, I need a motion.
We have discussion, board discussion first. Or are
We did
actually-
have board discussion before public comment, but
Oh, we did. So we passed up. I just wanted to take a moment to say that I understand and share Captain Arola's concerns about this. I think that the $500,000 grant is a great idea if it ends up being an incentive to protecting our tax base and protecting our community. And I think that's the spirit under which the board agreed to do that. I would hope that we don't have to spend that the entire $500,000. And for personal experience, I think it's possible that people realize that they can cost effectively harden the grants. I also appreciate that the chief is willing to try new things and then pivot. And in doing so, I think there's a substantial likelihood that the entire $500,000 may not need to be spent. But that it's aspirational that we will get $500,000 in value maybe by inspiring the community to do $1 million or more of work by spending significantly less than $500,000. But so I just wanted to say I appreciate your concerns, and I think that given the times that we have, we need to be concerned about every single dollar we spent to protect our ability to do a variety of things. I don't know whether anybody else has any comments. Maybe I'm out of line on this, but just want to say I appreciate the comments.
I don't have any other comments.
Okay, then we'll entertain a motion.
I don't
And-
think there is a motion. right?
So a motion is only required if there's going to be.
Oh, this is
action.
just a reading.
Yeah,
Just
so
a what?
if there's
It's read- it's
additional
read.
direction,
It just moves forward. to the next item.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
we will move on to item 10.4.
Okay. 10.4. Special funding $3,500. Open Fire Safe Council.
Good evening, directors. At the December 2022 board meeting, a director reported receiving an email from the Oakland Fire Safe Council requesting $3,500 to continue their efforts to form an East Bay Hills Wildfire Prevention and Vegetation Management Group. The director asked an agenda item be brought forward, and this item was included as item 12.4 on the January 2023 regular agenda, which is linked there. The original request was also attached to this staff report, and there's more information regarding the publicly available efforts to form an East Bay Hills Wildfire Prevention Management Group is available at the website that's linked in the report. On March 27th, 2023, correspondence was received from Lisa Jacobs and John Kaufman submitting a letter of request from the Oakland Fire Safe Council for MOFD contribution to the legal and facilitation costs to establish an East Bay Hills Wildfire Prevention MOU, the draft of which is attached. Correspondence included a list of jurisdictions and the amount of their contributions. I conducted further follow-up to determine that Alameda County has made a payment to this effort of $7,500. Contra Costa County has made an equal contribution. The city of Berkeley is reviewing a contribution of $4,000. Oakland is reviewing a contribution of $6,000. Richmond is in the process. It's unclear where in the process of processing or of reviewing and processing a contribution of $3,500. Pinole has made a $1,000 contribution. Notably, that contribution was from the fire department budget as the fire department was being consolidated into Contra Costa County Fire Protection District. And MOFD has been requested to contribute $3,500. A director previously asked that this agenda be brought forward, and it's included on the agenda for the board's consideration. Be happy to answer any questions of note. Throughout the discussion of previously the attempt to form a JPA and the current attempt to form a MOU, district council has been participating with other district councils at district expense. And I've been participating as well, both as the MOFD fire chief and as the president of the Contra Costa County Fire Chiefs Association. I'd be happy to answer any questions the directors may have about these efforts or take direction with regard to the requested contribution.
I just wanted to, I assume that it's on here and that legal counsel has said it's okay for us to do this if we approve this. There's nothing to prohibit us from.
There's nothing to prohibit you from
Okay.
doing it. And what's our participate, like, if we contribute $3,500, what's our participation? We're just giving money or?
Well,
what's-
I think there's a two-part answer to that, sir. One part is that council and I have been and will continue to participate through his role with the other councils to review the proposed MOU, and then my role both as the fire chief, because the district has an interest and is adjacent to the area that in question, and many of the areas where the land lies that threatens the communities, Berkeley, El Cerrito, and Oakland specifically. That land lies within the fire district's boundaries, specifically owned by East Bay Parks and East Bay Mud, but within the fire district. And then I've continued to participate as well, representing the Contra Costa County Fire Chiefs Association on behalf of the other chiefs just to be efficient with everybody's time. That said, that's the first part of the question about staff and the district's role. The request for funding is the Oakland Fire Safe Council, a citizen group, has retained councils in order to develop the MOU and is seeking funds to further that process. As I said, though, part of that is sending it out for review by district council, which obviously occurs at district expense.
I guess the real issue for me is this something that would be beneficial for the district, our district to participate in? And it sounds like to some degree, since part of the area is in our district, that there is benefit of coordination. The question is this the right model?
Yes, sir. As I pointed out with the background information provided, I believe in March regarding other fire safety efforts, there's a great deal of overlap and duplicative of the district's participation in the Hills Emergency Forum, which we've been a member since 2006. We pay dues to that organization as well, and it involves many of the same participants. This group is slightly more expansive. It extends the range of where the HEF includes to the north and excludes the non-fire jurisdictions. Those agencies that do not have a fire code official are not included in this effort, at least at the current date. So there's definitely overlap and duplication. We struggle, the fire marshal and I, to ensure that we have attendance at all of these things, which are a tax on staff time, to ensure that we're represented. And then there are additional groups such as the Fire Chiefs Association, et cetera, in which there's a great deal of duplication. What's unique about this proposal is one, it expands the Hills Emergency Forum membership, or the groups that are also members of the Hills Emergency Forum plus additional others. But it also includes consideration of a body of elected officials that could gather to discuss related regional fire issues on a regular and recurring basis. That's unique and new. Whether that would be of value or whether that would be a place to talk about things, I think only time will tell. I do think it's noteworthy, though, that many of these same agencies that have the concern about wildfire and would benefit from the implementation of the district's fire safety ordinances and previously the fire code on those publicly owned lands that represent or that form the eastern border of those communities. Those political bodies have been silent during our lengthy and relatively public ongoing discussion of this topic with those agencies. So I don't know whether or not there would be value. I think there's certainly there is an opportunity for value with the formation of a political organization or of a gathering of elected officials, where consensus could be formed and regional efforts at the leadership level could be advanced. We find from time to time that regional coordination efforts and so forth carried out at the staff level don't survive contact with the elected bodies. And so that ultimately policy is a role of elected officials. And so that the discussions of things that where we believe there's opportunities for alignment at staff level become something different by the time they come out of the elected body. And so there could be an opportunity here that where there were staff recommendations that had regional benefit and regional consensus could be formed around those recommendations, the elected officials participating in this body could then go back to their full boards and bodies and advocate for the regional benefit, which could augment staff recommendations in that area as well. That said, if there is an interest in pursuing and supporting this effort, I do think it would be appropriate to review and consider whether or not the district chose to continue participating in the Hills Emergency Forum, or whether the district thought it was better to pivot to this new body, more broader scope, limited strictly to agencies that have fire code authority. So fire protection agencies as recognized by either their role as a municipal fire department or the fire district law of 1987. And so I do think there could be a reasonable discussion to be had about whether the district wanted to support this effort and to pivot from our current membership and have to participating in this new body, which comes ultimately with the uncertainty this new body does not yet exist.
President Jex. And last year maybe part of this year and in 2022, Director Jorgens and myself attended quite a few of these meetings, all on Zoom. I support this. I'll just say that right now. I support this funding at this time. I think this is a small investment right now for a potentially large return with grants and coordinating the activities. These payments that dues or that they're asking for is kind of an initial payment. So this will only get this group till September. After September, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, this is enough to pay. I think it was some legal fees and some other, some staff time basically to just continue this effort. I think in September, I think we may be facing, what the chief just talked about. Do we want to continue some of those other organizations we belong to? But I think for right now, all these other jurisdictions have paid in. From reading this, it sounded to me like we were the only ones that didn't, but
That's not correct. sir.
Yeah.
John Coffin made assertions that when they actually checked the books were not correct.
okay. So I would be in favor of this right now, as a small amount of money and see where it goes from there.
I could just clarify one thing, sir. In its current iteration, which has changed from their previous proposal, there is no mechanism under which this group could receive grants.
Really?
No, sir. This is a gathering of elected officials to talk about wildfire things.
What level of the elected officials? What within those jurisdictions like Oakland, is it the mayor? or
City council.
the City council?
City council, fire board directors in the case of the fire districts. So for the place that have a municipal fire department, the proposal would be 2 city council members or the mayor, and if it's an elected mayor, the mayor and city council member. And then in the case of a fire board, members of the governing body. And then in that case, that includes for the county fire department, somewhat confusingly, that because they're a dependent special district, the county board of supervisors sits as the fire board. So it would be a county supervisor, but they would be there as a county fire board member, not as a supervisor.
Well, on Director Danziger's recommendation, I'm willing to take a chance on it.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
First, should have public comment.
Yes. We do not have any hands raised or
We-
written public comment.
Could we have a motion then?
I'll make a motion to approve funding of $3,500 to the Oakland Fire Safe Council for the MOFD's contribution to the legal and facilitation costs to establish an East Bay Hills Wildfire Prevention MOU.
Second,
Just a question, clarification. Do we need to designate where those funds come from or anything? Or is that something you just,
No, it'll just come from the general fund.
okay.
Then we'll invite the public. Any comment on the motion?
So we do not have any hands raised or public comment on the motion.
Okay, then we can
Director,
vote.
Director Danziger.
Aye.
Director Hassler.
Aye.
Director Romer.
Aye.
Director Jeff.
Aye. Okay. Item 10.5. Fund balance policy. On the general fund minimum fund balance policy.
At the April board meeting, a director requested a future agenda item to review the district's fund balance policy and discuss the general fund minimum policy requirements. The current policy is included in the agenda packet as attachment A to item 10.5. It was approved by the board in July 2022. The policy is reviewed by the board on an annual basis. The next review and approval is scheduled for July 2023. The policy states the district will maintain a minimum fund balance of unrestricted fund balance in the general fund of at least 17% of budgeted general fund revenue at fiscal year end, with a goal of achieving a 50% year-end general fund balance in the long term. Staff requests board direction regarding the policy and minimum requirements.
Well, I was the director that made the request, so I guess I'll just comment on it. The 17% was probably set back when the district had to go through a period of layoff personnel, cutting positions. The 17%, if you look at it in terms of dollars, it's about enough money to cover a 2-month period. And particularly if you looked at going forward in 2024, you got almost, well, you got your 7 million, you're going to have probably 8 million going out the door. You're going to have, in a sense, in the first 2 months, the issue is covering the first 6 months of any fiscal year when we don't have any revenue other than fines and other things. So it's really a period, what they call a dead period, or whatever you want to call it, where there's no revenue in terms of property tax coming in. If you look years ago, when I first came on the board, I did an analysis of about 10 districts. We were the only one that didn't have as an objective of 50% of revenue as a reserve to cover that dead period. For example, I looked up just recently, San Ramon, they have 70% plus in their general reserve fund. They have what they call a dry period, which is another dead period, or what you want to call it, of 50%. Then they have a stabilization for emergencies of another 20%. I've gone through and looked at, in our long-range plan, at the next 10 years, and we never drop below 40. It's 2021, it was 42, 49, 48, 46, 43, 43, 42, 44, 46, 53, 62, 75. So no period in there, in our, at least our current long-range forecast, do we follow below 40%. To me, it's ludicrous to think that a 17% reserve is adequate. And when someone looks at the policy and says it's 17% with a goal to get to 50, it assumes that 17% would be okay. It's not. And particularly when you look at $9 million of cash going out the door next fiscal year, some of that's going to come out of the general reserve fund by transfer. Even then, we don't drop below 40%. So I was, as a minimum, would recommend that we consider setting it at 40% with a goal to maintain it above 50%. So that's the issue. It's been a policy that I believe is misleading. I think it's incorrect. If we ended up in this 17%, we'd have to be borrowing through the teeter plan to cover. If we ever fell to 17%, we'd really be in real trouble. We couldn't meet our obligations.
So go ahead.
Oh, so have we ever fallen to 17% that you're, since you've been on the board, John?
It was low when I came on the board 6 years ago. It was in the probably 20, 30,
Okay.
and it's grown.
I have a question. And again, it's partly due to my ignorance, is not having been here at the last session when you apparently put this on the agenda. But is this mandatory Or is this a general policy that's,
It's a stated policy that's in the financial statements. It's basically a policy that guides
the proportion of,
right, for example, when you look at the budget for the plan for the year, we would, it's stipulated in our budget, isn't it?
well, what effect, if any, does Director Jorgen's previous suggestion that we invest in treasury bills rather than, which would increase, no effect at all, no interplay?
No,
It's the opposite. It generates additional revenue, but the
Director
the
Jorgen's
location-
plan does. I understand that.
The location of the funds, whether they be in Leif, Teeter, or invested in treasuries, has no impact on the district's unrestricted reserve. It's just a different way of holding the money.
Yeah.
Essentially. everything.
it guides the board when they're setting a budget or a plan or whatever it is, that there is sufficient funds to cover the period, the first 6 months where there's no revenue.
No, I understand that, but
And so-
it doesn't require us to sell any of our T-bills
No,
before they mature.
No, this is just a stated policy.
Okay,
it's a stated policy.
as
So what's the
a district.
downside then? Why wouldn't you do it?
Well, it just means putting it means putting more money into this reserve fund.
From
Taking
where?
money
Or
out of the
maintain it.
budget,
Taking money out of where to put it in?
take it out of the general fund somewhere.
But where, I mean,
Not take it out of the general fund. To clarify, it would be of the district's discretionary funds included in the budget.
Okay.
In the current environment, the policy is no less than 17%. The goal is 50%, non-binding goal, and has been that case since about 2018. If the policy were changed to a higher number, that would affect the budget that we put together with regard to discretionary funding that is being proposed in the budget and would constrain our recommended expenditures there. As Gloria mentioned, a significant portion of our budget is non-discretionary. We have to pay our contracts, we have to pay our bills, we have to pay for fuel, vehicle maintenance, those sort of things that are required to operate the district.
Right.
Discretionary funding, though, would be
such as the home hardening grant.
such as a number of things. Yes, sir.
So
Would
we
be
could pull it out of this requires us to pull it out of the home
Well,
hardening grant to the
It would be,
500,000?
should the board,
We-
should the general
if-
fund
if-
minimum balance
if-
change, that would
if
change
you
our
didn't-
budgeting.
If the
assumptions.
budget with the grant in fell below 40%. Or down below that, you would scrub it. In other words, it would influence your decision on budgeting.
Within the elements of the budget, the discretionary, yes. sir.
And it also broadcast out to the public when they look at it, or to any rating agency or others that look at financial statements. That if you got down to 17%, you'd be risky.
Okay, so it might require us to agendize in the next month that we reduce the home hardening grant from 500,000 to 50,000.
Okay, so no,
No,
So, all
We
right.
aren't-
So as
we
part
aren't
of
there.
the draft budget, I calculated what the projected general fund balance, it would be 44% based on the
44%,
budget,
so you're
right?
that.
So theoretically, if that was less than 40, if the board chooses to raise it to 40%, and if it was less than 40%, then again, it's non-binding, so it's a board decision. But then the board would theoretically reduce expenditures or increase revenue to maintain a 40% minimum.
Okay.
If we were to fall below that, which we're not
Right.
projected to fall below that, so it would have no impact on the budget we just discussed.
Correct.
What do you think,
Currently.
Director Haslund? You,
What,
are you,
I see no downside to making
need
the
to-
proposal because it seems like it's a financially prudent decision and
If you-
policy. to
if
have.
you look at Moraga, for example, Moraga. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when they had the bridge collapse, or it's more than that, I guess, it's probably
Sure,
4 or 5
sure.
years.
right,
Time
right.
goes by fast,
It's a rainy day.
and they, and
Yeah. I know.
not a rainy day, and they had
So it's a-
the sinkhole.
Mhm.
Two issues. Their general fund reserve dropped below 50%, and they declared the board a financial emergency. because
Okay.
they had to cut, what they had to do is go ahead and cut other services, parks and recreation, discretionary kinds of items, because they didn't have enough money to cover the first 6 months
Right,
in
okay.
cash.
All right, I'm convinced. If the two accounting experts on the board as well as Director Danziger are in favor of it,
No,
And I
no,
put-
no, I'm not, don't say I'm in favor.
Yeah,
You're not.
in favor of it.
No.
your position is you're against it?
Well, I haven't heard a very specific proposal, but let me say this, I would say that the scheduled review is in July. So I'm not ready to make any direction right now on changing the policy. We're scheduled to talk about this in July. We do it on an annual basis, so.
Yes, sir. Just to be clear, we're looking at the staff recommendation. We're seeking direction. There's not an item for a vote,
Not
but the
action.
direction is being sought so that when we bring this back in July for the annual review, the direction of the board is included to the best degree. Understanding the board has the ability to modify, amend, change,
Okay.
or not change.
All right.
Okay,
But we are seeking direction for the sense of what the board would like to see included in the July report. So that July report
Okay,
is to the greatest degree possible maps of the board's intent in advance. So we reduce the degree of change that occurs
Okay.
during. the
that's very helpful. Then my inclination is to lean toward changing from 17 to 40%.
Considering the change. in
Considering
our-
the change in the
In our
budget.
analysis that goes into our meeting.
Yes.
Next time to see what impact that would have on us. Right, because
Correct.
that's what's gonna happen in July, is we're gonna.
No, sir.
we're-
The-
No,
the
that-
budget
we're
is
just
the
gonna
analysis.
revisit. We're just
Right.
gonna revisit.
Yes, so the
This.
budget includes, as do the quarterly reports and so forth. The analysis of our budget position or our reserve position is already done
Okay,
and included in a variety of other locations. July will be a policy discussion, not a practical discussion
Oh,
of,
okay.
as a policy, the board seeks to maintain or change the current reserve general fund minimum balance policy as distinct from the goal.
and so, sorry, because I'm new. That policy is done like every July. Do we review it every
Yes, sir.
July, just regularly after the budget's been approved? And the next month
Yes,
we
right.
go back and look at.
Mhm.
policies?
Yes, sir. And
Okay,
so that would then inform the development of the subsequent year budget.
but starting over.
That would be one of the considerations as we developed the budget and took a look at the district's position at the time we were developing and in the budget and the anticipated position during the budget year that we were developing.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. No. We want to go through the,
Would you like to invite public comment? Dan Elbana,
Good evening, members of the board. Can everybody hear me? I'm hearing a little echo wherever I'm in right now. I just wanted to ask a question. I remember a few 6 months to a year ago when Highmark gave their presentations on our funds and how they're doing and whatever. I remember that the presenter mentioned something as to the fact that the pension rate stabilization fund can be used to reimburse the general fund for pension costs. So not just for overage or stuff like that, but for our annual pension costs that the pension rate stabilization fund can reimburse the general fund. And I bring this up just as a question that as we look at the general fund and wanting to hit that 50% mark, you could easily take from, I guess the way I look at it, and I'm wondering if it's something that you guys consider and thinking about, that you can take from the pension rate stabilization fund to pay your annual pension costs so that you don't dip below that 40% or so that you can attain your goal of 50%. So I see these two funds that they're, there's the general unrestricted fund and the pension rate stabilization fund. Yes, that's set up for pension, but all of our pension costs come out of the general fund. We make our payments out of the general fund so that these are inherently linked accounts. And I wonder if you guys consider or think about the fact that when we factor in that minimum of 40% or a goal of 50% and maintaining above 50%, if you've considered at all or talked about linking those two accounts to get your percentage. Thank you.
and that concludes our public comment.
Appreciate your comments. Well,
I'm sorry.
Posted as a question.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
I think it was posed as a question. Dan's comment was a question.
Was it up on the thing? It says a motion, so we would.
It is up to the directors to decide to respond to the question.
I believe we're going to talk about the stabilization fund next, isn't that on the
That's on the agenda
next? So
next month.
no, it's on this one. It's the next item. It's the next item on the agenda. I wonder if in conjunction, we could answer the question with that item.
Good idea.
Yeah,
If,
Yeah.
because they go together. If
Yeah.
that's okay.
That's a good suggestion.
okay,
Then that concludes our public comment.
yes.
Well, we don't need a motion on 10.5 because that's just
No.
to provide direction. So we're moving on.
Item 10.6.
Pension funding policy, 10.6.
At the April board meeting, a director requested a future agenda item to discuss development of a pension funding policy that would address the district's pension rate stabilization trust fund, a trust account. I reached out for assistance to GovInvest, which is the firm that provides the pension software that the district uses. GovInvest provided some sample policies from other public agencies and some excerpts of various items that the board may want to consider when developing a policy. The GovInvest information is included with the staff report as attachments C through F. Also included as attachment B are the best practices published by the Government Finance Officers Association, which includes core elements of a pension funding policy. An actuary from GovInvest is scheduled to attend the July board meeting and can assist the board with development of a pension funding policy at that time. Staff requests board direction regarding development of a pension funding policy. So we're basically set this up to provide some educational materials for the board members based on the request that was made at the last meeting. So the board can discuss if have questions, additional information. And then we thought then in July, when the actuary comes from GovInvest, then he could provide additional information as the board needs.
And I asked the question, so I think my question was, and I think you provided the policy we have is we set up the funds, correct, to put the delta between, it was like a 1%, right? Basically a 1% decrease.
Now a 3/4%, yes.
3/4. We set our rate and it used to be 1% lower than theirs and now it's this. And so that is how we calculate the amount that goes into our stabilization fund.
Yes, sir.
But the policy does not state when or how we use the stabilization.
There is no policy. Yes, sir. So the ARC is.
That is the direction I think we're trying to decide as a board is our direction to. I'm trying to figure out what we want to do as a board, I guess. On that point, because it's the balances used to be small and now they're getting larger. But yet the gap they're trying to cover is getting bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at the time, it goes back how many years?
2017, sir, it preceded my arrival and we began making the full actuarially recommended contribution
Right.
in 2019.
And it was right after that I remember came on the board. The pension stabilization fund was basically to cover the gap and a widening gap at that time, and it was huge, $60–70 million unfunded pension liability. A fund that would provide funding if for something happened. That was basically the intent, is that you had this unfunded pension liability, an obligation and a commitment we had made to the employees that if anything happened to the district, the money would be there to cover it. And so we've had a gyrating unfunded pension liability. It's narrowed down to, 12 million, and that if we get the correct numbers, it could be high as 40 or $50 million again, or could even be higher. So that was the intent. The application would be that if we ever had a situation where we could not pay the pension payment, in other words, the $7 million, if come July, we couldn't pay that. The pension stabilization fund could be used, although I don't think it was codified in the policy, to cover that shortfall of being unable to make the payment for the pension. But it was never considered. I think the comment last month was, that it was a slush fund that could be used to stay, in and out. It was never intended. It was basically to cover a commitment and an obligation to employees that they know with a surety would be there to fund their pension benefit if or something happened. For example, if the district were to go through bankruptcy or where several cities did, one of the things that got cut was the pension benefits that were committed to the employees. This would forego that. I mean, not forego, but this is what this is intended to cover, is that risk or shortfall that something could happen. That at least they're covered. And so the intent is to whatever that number is, which is a big floating number, that unfunded pension liability is covered. Right now, what's in the fund wouldn't even cover 1 year's pension payment. So it's not a big number. But the intent is to have it grow so that we can, if Cirrus's performance improved, then you would be able to reduce it. But if Cirrus's performance doesn't improve, or the funding mechanism, then it's there. So it's a reserve to cover an obligation that would be otherwise not covered.
Right.
And so I just felt very strongly that, if you're making a commitment to a group of employees that they're going to get such and such in a benefit, you better plan to fund it.
Right. Right.
And if the pension benefit or the pension plan doesn't fund it adequately by, raising as I look at it, knowing what the unfunded pension liability was then and what it probably will be again, the intent sometimes is for payers to pay little. I mean, I know, for example, on some public entities, the companies or organizations, the districts, want to pay less. And so there's a tension sometimes not to fund what is really required to cover an obligation or liability. And so it's hard to know if that was what Cirrus has been doing or not. I don't know. I don't have enough information forthcoming from them. But it's certainly, we have an obligation, I believe, to whatever that is and wherever it comes. Hopefully, eventually, Cirrus be fully funded, and if that was the case, then the pension stabilization fund would be available to do whatever. It would go back into the general fund.
And President Jex, just a question, sorry, because you have the most history. Would like a policy, just if you were thinking about a broad policy for it, would it be something like, if we're fully funded, then we don't need to make contributions because that's what I think our actuary would tell us, is my guess, is if we.
Yeah, if they ever became fully funded, you wouldn't need it.
You wouldn't need it.
There were 3 sample policies included in the attachment,
Yeah.
D, E, and F. And so 1 or 2 of them, yes, did address that, where it gets into, if it's fully funded, then the pension contribution to the trust you wouldn't make it. And then there was another one that said, addressed how the district does contributes the contribution at the 6.25% rate. So that it would be another thing that the board may want in the policy. So was there one of these policies that the board members thought you would like to use as a starting point for Moraga-Orinda's policy?
I'm going to say I would need to review the policies further. I read them, but I don't know that I have one that I would suggest, but we are trying to come to a policy by July, right? Is when this is up for discussion
In July, well,
or direction, give you
Well,
direction.
yes, sir. In July, we have an expert coming who was simply was unavailable in May or June.
Okay.
So the intent of this item is to give the board, there's an opportunity to present to the board some examples that were provided by GovInvest as what other entities have done with a similar fund. To give the board an opportunity to consider this and to discuss it if that was the board's pleasure, provide direction if that was the board's pleasure or not. The recommendation is that in July, when the expert comes, informed by the information included in this staff report, and more importantly, by these attachments of what others have done. Gloran's done a lot of great things and a lot of good work, but this isn't an area where she has done this before, nor have I. So I'm very aware of our limitations as far as making recommendations to the board, so that this is intended to inform the discussion and the questions the board may have for the expert in July, to participate in that back and forth, and from there provide direction staff that would eventually, hopefully sooner rather than later, manifest in a policy. To Director or President Jex's point, the intent that under which the funds were established live on in the director singular tonight who was there. However, in the absence of a policy, I think there's a very open question about under what specific circumstances. I think it's easy in the concept to agree that a pension stabilization fund is a long-term investment against unplanned increases. I think it would be very helpful for all parties involved, the membership, the district, the directors, to have that enshrined in a policy that provided the specific direction under what circumstance constituted the district's inability to pay. Because I think depending on who you ask, those could be very different answers, but people with firmly held opinions, and enshrining this in policy would reduce future confusion, concern, and the time to establish that policy is left to the bank before there is a crisis of some sort.
John, I appreciate your comment on in the public sector. I mean, this is not unusual to have it. I think because there was several bankruptcies of several cities that went through, and the pension benefits got cut in half or a third. And so I think a lot of these stabilization funds were set up to cover that gap between what they were being funded at too low a rate in terms of payment into the funds, which I think has been the case with Cirrus for a long time. They've not funded it adequately.
I actually chair a commission, Glendale, on this issue, writing this policy. So I've looked at a zillion of them. There are a lot of options. The challenge, I think there are really two pieces. In a sense, the 115 plan potentially does two different things. So we've called our stabilization plan, and that's a very common, more common than the other. But it is also in some ways a hedge against the rates just going on. It's actually what we are doing, the way we structured it, which is very intelligent, is we said, and this is not me, this is the record at the time, that look, Sarah's saying it's gonna that the presumed return is at the time more than 7%. I think it's 7.5%. It might have been 8%. It's really high.
Which lowers the payment of
Lowers the
that,
payment.
which is unrealistically
It's your artificially paid
too little. Exactly.
So the real intention was to pay what we felt we were really the liability, consistent with the liability we were actually accruing. Not really even focused on how the markets were doing, but simply based on the idea that markets aren't going to do reliably 7.5. I think it's
Yeah.
So that's what it was really for. And so at the time, I don't think, and this is very common for policies. Most of the policies don't have an explanation about when do you start actually using the policy. However, there are a couple of jurisdictions for the first time this year that are beginning to think about using what's in policy. I think as a matter of policy. The challenge with that is if you're seeing, Chief and I are actually talking about this today. If you're seeing a bump that goes very high and you think it's going to come down really quickly, you know, you could see an argument for that. So that's a stabilization argument. The problem is if you go back to Chief just ran this discussion, you know, if you go back to 2000. Well, it's really 15, right?
If I may, this is a record of the districts, the percentage of pensionable payroll that the district is paid to Cesara. And if we go back to the low within the range, which goes back to 07, in 2009, 2010, the district's percentage of pensionable payroll paid to Cesara for our 3 at 50 safety members was 25.02, which this speaks to the smoothing and the delay. In 9-10, things were dire, but the pension system was still banking the good returns of the years prior to the 08 crash. So there's a flow to these things. It rose rapidly from 9-10 at 25.02 to a high of 80.03 in 2014-2015, right? So a dramatic increase, which coincided with some very low points in district cash on hand as we worked through. So I'd point out that in 14-15, both the economy, the real estate market, and the equities markets were doing just fine. But there was a residual because of smoothing. So it rose to a high of 80% in 14-15. It dropped to 71% in 15-16. So a 9% return that was great. And there it stayed through the boom of the longest bull market in history until this current year, where it still sits at 70.35. So we saw a rapid rise to 80%, a reasonably rapid, a next year drop to 71, and it got very sticky at that point. And now we see a rise from 70 to 80% in 70% current year, 80% in next year, and an anticipated rise going as high as 99% in 28-29. And I should note that 99% in 28-29 presumes that Cesara will return 6.75% return on its investments between now and then, which may or may not be true. They may overperform, they may underperform. But the point is that all of the estimates going forward, which are sticky, presume that our rates will continue to rise. And even under the past performance of the stock market, 2009 to the pandemic was a historic run, our rate stayed at about 70%. For our PEPR members who are 2.7, at 57, we see a similar rise, just they sit about 11% lower as the percentage of pensionable payroll, but the rise is mirrored in it. So we would offer up from a historical standpoint, the rates have gone up, they have tend to stay up. And when there is, when Cesara underperforms, and this year dramatically, 17%, 17.25, we will see a future rise to make up for their underperformance. And then there's an additional, and then just one other item that's worth mentioning is we have our regular costs and we have our UAAL, which is Cesara's makeup for when they underperform. That's them resetting the bill, if you will, for where their performance, their investment of our regular contribution did not match their expectations. The UAAL is the makeup where we true up them. When they changed their return assumption from 7% to 6.75%, that closed the delta between our returned assumption of 6%, which drives the ARC for the pension stabilization trust fund. So the same amount of money is still flowing out, just now 1/4 of it is going to Cesara and not to the pension stabilization trust fund. Right? So the same amount of money, slightly differing distribution, which is why you see a reduction in the ARC going, and it may be corrected by this, but you see a relative reduction to the ARC to what would have been, and a relative increase in either the regular or the UAAL, or to the regular rates, anticipating a future reduced rate of return, which is President Jex pointed out before, even a 1/4% reduction, which is small, has a massive increase on future
In the
pension liabilities.
Yeah. When I was looking at the numbers, I mean, it could rise if things really, the market stays as volatile as it is now in the next few years. I mean, 7,000,003 could be 8,000,000, 9,000,000, which is great. I'd rather have them do it and fund it adequately, which means that we can put less in to the stabilization fund. But to the extent that that number, if it is $100 million unfunded pension liability, we better, in terms of our responsibility, is to hopefully adequately provide for that shortfall if and when something did get the fan.
Yes, sir. And then just last one to give context, because the unfunded liability in some ways is an abstract number. The conversion to the concrete number of implications for the budget, the 10% increase in our pension obligation from current year to next year, so starting July 1st, happening now at 10.31, or sorry, at 10.45% increase. That's just an increase pension obligation of $1,045,000 next year.
So we'll be at almost 9 million.
Yes, sir. And then cumulatively over the period, it sees a cumulative additional outflow of $3 million, and that's still presuming that the that they make the numbers. That they make the numbers. And then the last thing, which is just a pension specific, is because of smoothing, the full Cesara will not book the full cost of last year's underperformance for several years, which is why, just like during the boom times of the previous bull market, our rates were sticky because they were still feathering in or smoothing in the losses of 2008 of the crash then. So when markets go up and when markets go down, there's a significant delay in when those are fully accounted for and when we see that cost, designed to reduce the shocks to the government agencies that have to make these contributions.
So I think, see the question, I think it's a great, first of all, I think having a policy makes a ton of sense. Figuring out what it is hard. Because you really, I think actually in many respects, your policy is one of the smarter policies that's out there by making up this difference in what is the assumed rate of return by Cesara versus what do we think they're going to make, which is, and by the way, we haven't done some dramatic underestimate. They've actually underachieved our number.
By a long way.
Yes. So, I think it's a very smart policy. The question, becomes, okay, so at what point though, if you're going to write a full policy, it does probably you want to address one, are we putting in the right amounts? Is this a sane strategy? Is that number's getting smaller by virtue of the fact that their assumed return is coming down? Is that right? Do we have those numbers right? Should we be more cautious on that? So the whole discussion about that, I think. And then secondarily, there's a discussion which doesn't exist in the policy at all of, okay, at what point would you turn around and use this? And what is your policy about that?
Yeah.
So I think that is all best practice. I will say there's tremendous diversity in policies that are out there about this. And it's a super interesting question about what you do at the end. There's an old line, that eternity is very, very long, except near the end. And that's sort of the question behind this policy.
Yeah.
And
Well, I would just piggyback on what you said. We got this on Friday or
Yeah,
weekend.
and there's a lot.
So I would suggest that, we get a chance to really digest it especially after hearing what you all said, and maybe bring it back on the agenda next month.
Yeah, and then in July, you'll have your expert, which is great. And I would also say, it looks like in July, I'm just looking at this, the actuarial report for December 31, 22 should come out from Sarah. So, although we already have kind of the heads up on what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Be delightful.
What do you think about that? Just
I
putting
think
it
that's a
on.
good idea, though. I
Yeah.
think.
Is the fellow that's
Yeah.
coming in
We'll just.
an
Yes.
actuary?
Yes,
So that's one of the things, that's that big black box. As to really how they make those determinations, because it sounds like to me it's more. There's wide, huge differences in that deferred inflow and outflow numbers. Changing actuarial assumptions. I mean, there's a $30 million offset. 34 million in, 34 million out. I mean, where they come up with some of the information is just a huge mystery to me. I mean, I just don't, I've never seen such wild swings in actuarial information in my life. I mean, and I've practiced on a lot of companies and we'd get information from the actuaries, but this is like circus time.
Yeah, they refer to it as volatility. There's tremendous.
How do you plan?
Yeah.
I mean, the only way I can plan for volatility is to provide resources to cover shortfall. And that was basically when we really did it and when we funded it as we did, that was the objective, is to make sure that that volatility wasn't going to affect the employees long term.
Would you like to invite public comment?
Sure.
Dan Albana.
Good evening, directors. I'm not raising my hand because my previous question wasn't answered. You guys, if you have the chance to talk about it, I know you probably haven't all sat down and thought about the interaction between the general and restricted and pension fund and stuff like that. So I understand if you're not ready to answer that question. I did have a question, or maybe more of a comment as far as when more creating this policy, as you guys go about creating this policy. And again, I think it's a great idea. I do appreciate the fact that the board is concerned of our pension obligations. As a firefighter at MOFD, it's vitally important. I plan my life and retirement and my family's life and retirement on the pension. So it's not something that we take lightly. And it's something that we do, something that I personally appreciate. The hard work and diligence you are all putting into making sure we're on the right track with this. My question specifically for this right now is what the investment is along with this policy. Is it simply like, where is it? Is it going to be invested very similarly to what Cesara is doing? Is it going to be more conservative, more aggressive? I think, and maybe I'm off on this on how policy should be written, but there potentially should be some guidance in the policy as well as far as how it's invested. Because when Cesara takes a dump and doesn't do well, and we are on the same type of aggressive standing as them, then we as well go down. So it's less of a hedge against how they're performing if we're kind of in the same boat as them. So I just like to cautionarily say that, that is something to consider and talk about when you fine gentlemen are developing this policy. Thank you very much.
Appreciate your comment. I was going to just say, we do set a policy as to how the funds are invested. We've done that. We've made it clear we wanted no foreign. I mean, some of the risk issues we tried to take out of the investment of those funds. So I wouldn't call it really conservative, but it certainly was tailored very carefully in terms of where we felt there were risks. And there is a policy stipulated as to how the funds are to be invested.
And President Jex, just a question then, is that stated in the policy? Or is it?
Different policy.
There's a different policy. Okay.
Different, it's in a different policy.
So I can find the
But
policy.
there is a
then.
policy. We met, in fact, we changed
Yeah.
it twice. At least
Is that the investment policy that we've talked
Investment
about?
policy.
Okay.
In
Yeah.
other words, we no bonds because we felt there were risk in the bonds.
Emerging markets.
The emerging market.
Item 10.7.
Okay. Visits to the board, directors.
Meeting directors, during the public budget workshop held on April 19th, 2023, a director requested the opportunity to present proposed changes to the board of directors page in the draft budget, which is page 12. Draft version presented on April 19th, 2023 is attached to attachment A. The proposal submitted by Director Danziger is included as attachment B. I would leave it to the board to discuss and provide direction to staff. Any direction provided here will be updated in the budget document that you will see for adoption in June.
President Jex, I put this on the agenda and I submitted some proposed changes. Since I've been on the board of directors, description and standards and goals have remained the same. And I just wanted to update it. That's basically what this is my attempt to just put some more precise language and some, some more information in there of what we do and our goals for including goals for the new year. And you have it in front of you, so.
Appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, it just hadn't been done since I've been here, so.
Yeah. I read them, Director Danziger, and I thought they were thoughtful comments and edits to it. And I appreciate the work that was done on it.
Yeah, I don't think thank you. And I just don't think it made any, substantial big changes. It just really, I think it depicts a little closer what we're doing and
Right.
that was all.
I agree. And I also appreciate
Yeah,
your,
I thought it was well done.
yeah.
Okay.
Would you like to invite public comment?
Sure.
We do not have any hands raised or written public comment.
Okay.
Well, if we don't have, if no one has objections, I would just propose that the changes I made just be incorporated in the budget document.
Lori,
I'm
I'm
not hearing
gonna
any.
say, what,
Yeah, do we need
this
to
would be part of
vote?
the budget.
Yeah.
That section.
This is just in the budget.
Yeah, it just replaces this page.
Mhm.
The page that's presently in there would just have these changes. That's all.
Do we need to vote on?
That's our direction. I believe we have the direction and we will incorporate this in the final budget that the board will see in June. And a adoption of the budget would be the adoption of these goals. So the director's opportunity to vote vote on this would be as part of the budget
Part of the
adoption. in June.
adoption, okay. All right, so we could just.
Done.
Well, thank you.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah,
thank you.
Director Danziger.
Okay. Committee reports. The audit committee has a meeting on the 19th.
Yes, this Friday, May 19th, starting at 4:30 here in the Sarge room.
We have 3 auditors who have responded to the second round of the RFP, and 2 will be in person, 1 will be participating via Zoom. We've allotted a half hour for each to allow the audit committee an opportunity to ask pertinent questions that would then result in a recommendation from the audit committee to the full board for selection of an auditor in alignment with our purchasing policies. And that would come to the board in the June meeting to allow the auditor to begin their audit in time to produce in accordance with our normal delivery schedule.
And just a question, is it permissible for any of us board members to attend that meeting? And can we ask questions?
If you end up with a quorum there, the answer is that well, it's a quorum now.
Can I attend just as a member of the public or you can't? I just,
It's generally thought not to be a great idea.
Okay.
We sort of discourage that parse
Oh,
of it.
okay.
Because
Because then it's not
You're
ad
still
hoc committee.
exchanging, right, and you're still exchanging, you have three people who are potentially exchanging views yeah.
And it's not a public meeting, right? That,
It is, it is.
that is a public
So the
meeting?
Audit committee
Oh,
is
understand
a,
that.
is a standing committee. So it is a public. Meeting. So
Hmm.
that's the problem. So
Yes, it seems like on the line, right? I mean, I don't know the rules exactly, but it's a public meeting where the public's invited, so.
It is a regular committee, so it's subject to the same Brown Act rules as
Okay.
its body is. However, it attracts even less attention sometimes.
And the three of us who are not on this committee cannot attend.
I do not think it is wise for anybody,
Okay.
because then then you have a quorum, and, I mean, in theory, if you sat blindfolded in the back of the room, I suppose it'd be okay, but I really don't encourage it.
Okay.
And this meeting will be in person only.
In person
Yeah.
only. Okay.
Other committees?
Nothing on 11.2.
I just asked, I'd just like to ask a question, Director Romer. What about the joint fire prevention with the city of Orinda? Is that?
Yeah, are we at 11.4 already? Because I haven't prepared a written report, but we did have the May 4th
Oh, you
meeting.
did.
I could give a quick oral
So we need-
summary that I thought it went very well. Both Director Jorgens and I were present, city council members G and Malkani were present. We had great participation in the audience, and there was a number of agenda items. The one that took up probably the most time was a discussion about the Orinda, Moraga-Orinda, or Orinda Moraga, or one of several other possible names of the Fire Safe Council. Judd Hammond was present from the SSTOC committee, but more significantly on that issue, Melanie Light and Mark Evans were present. And Mark Evans was very helpful. Obviously, we're not going to, at that 2x2 committee member, going to make any decisions that are binding on this, but I was very appreciative of what Melanie Light and Mark Evans are doing on their own time to put together an Orinda Fire Safe Council. Councilwomen G and Mel County had a number of questions about that and what it would entail in terms of obligations incurred by the city council. But I think that their questions, both by Chief Winokur and I think, Mark Evans actually chimed in on that too. So I think that the general consensus was, let's proceed. There's no final decision made. We'll get further reports from particularly from Mark Evans. But in general, it's a good idea. It's worth the resources of our special district, and it's worth the resources of the city council as well. Any other comments, Chief, or anybody else who chime in on?
They've engaged, so I've got some highly motivated and available residents working on the 501c3, which is a precursor on becoming a fire safe council underneath the California Fire Safe Council framework. So that'll be the next big hurdle for this effort, is for them to complete the 501c3 effort, become recognized as 501c3, become recognized as a fire safe council underneath the California Fire Safe Council structure. And then that opens the door for receipt of external funding sources, specifically federal grants that are funneled through the state entity, and we've been benefiting from in the district with the $5,000 community grants currently distributed by the Dalville Fire Safe Council.
So how would this be funded?
Oh, there is no funding, sir.
Well, there is no funding.
No, sir. Becoming a fire safe councils are eligible to receive grant funds. And so there's no certainty of that. But in the current environment, at least, there are lots of grant funds seeking homes. And having an organized fire safe council that has a pathway to doing work on the ground at the community scale with clear benefits. Sleepy Hollow, no Juniper Left Behind is really a poster child. It's the seminal example to be pointed to. having it, since we have a group that is interested in fire safety and is organized around the idea of fire safety communication and information sharing with their neighbors. Getting them into the Fire Safe Council world opens the opportunity for future grant applications to external sources for funding.
Any other reports? If not, we'll future agenda items.
We're going to open public comment for the committee reports,
Can do.
and we do not have any hands raised or public comment.
Any
Future.
agenda items?
Oh, yeah, I do. So maybe in the chief reports next month, if it's possible, I'm not saying. Or when you can get to it, I'd like to see, we haven't seen in a while, the stats on the CWS signups in our district. I know we got it, I don't think we've had it since the new boards here, and I thought it'd just be interesting to see. And then also, maybe when the fire marshal does his report, if we can get an update on the grant program. You know, where it stands as far as what we've given out, what we spent. And then also, going back to what I said at the beginning of the meeting about listing the property owners who've been issued citations. I would like to see the property addresses of just $500 citations issued. I won't go below that, but I would like to see that.
You want that part of the monthly?
Yeah, I could, I think the fire marshal could do it. I just list another list.
If we do that and it's in the agenda, then it's public.
Yeah.
Is that something we would?
I think it's a policy call. I can't think, if it's public record, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be public record. Then there's nothing to stop you from putting in the agenda. It's a little bit of a judgment call. Do you want to do that? Because it's called, obviously it's a little more public. Whoever, a newspaper reporter or whatever can look at it.
Well, let me ask this to the board. Do you want to discuss it next meeting? Should we just put it on the agenda to talk about that, or?
Let's talk about it.
You want to do that? Want to do it that way?
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay, so chief, forget it, putting it on, we'll have an agenda item just to make a policy decision if we want to do it.
Good idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's better.
I'll accept the motion for adjournment.
We just need to take public comment on the future agenda items. And we do not have any public comment.
I'll make a motion to
I move to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Oh, I'll second it.
Roll call.
Director Danziger?
Aye.
Director Hassler?
Aye.
Director Romer?
Aye.
Director Jack?
Aye.
Time is 10:06.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.